Um, Welcome everyone. First of all, let me take this time to acknowledge our panel this morning. First of all, Honorable Governor Berg for Pacific. It's such a great pleasure to have you here. I know you have a very busy schedule today, but just to find time to be with us is we're very, very honored to have you here. Also joining us on the panel this afternoon is the curator of the National Museum, Dr. Andrew Motu. Thank you, Doctor, for you to grace us with your presence this afternoon. And the final panelist on this discussion we will be having in Haus is the young Dagia Aka. Thank you, Dagia. So by way of introduction, I'll just read some this little phrase that I think it's worth as a fitting foundation for us to have that discussion. Such topics like sexual reproductive health, gender, bodily autonomy are very sensitive in our culture, in Papua New Guinea. And to engage citizens to have this conversation, it's difficult. Those discussions do happen. I'll just continue, and then you can put yourself. Great. So I was saying, because of the behavior in our society is changing, there's a need to have those sensitive discussions. But we have to acknowledge that we have to do it in a confined, safe space that everybody can feel, synthesized, but also able to confidently address these issues. Okay. So because of this, through the Bilum Campaign, UNFPA, through the UN agencies, we're trying to create a platform to have this discussion, and to bring in our leaders, aspiring leaders here, and then to also bring in the young people so we can have this interaction and to see how we can go about to discuss these things that are affecting our lives in this new society that we live in. So let me now welcome everybody to this Hausman dialogue. So we, as much as possible, try to create a dialogue that would happen in a Hausman. Those of you who are Papua New Guineans, you know that there's a rite of passage from a boy to become a man. You go through the Hausman, and we have the curator who knows more about this, who will really tell us what it means for a young person to transit from a boy to a Hausman. And in that context, we will have difficult conversation that really develops you into a man. You are a man. You are not man. So to help us along, we have these key critical speakers. We will ask them a couple of questions, and then in terms of their feedback, we can have this interaction. So the topic of discussion is what it means to be a real man in Papua New Guinea. How is this changing? How does this impact men's and boys' health? How this has an impact on women and girls' rights. As you know, men, boys play a critical role in achieving gender equality, sexual reproductive health, for themselves, their family, their community. So the discussion is a chance to explore our challenges and then our opportunities to do so. So with that, I've already introduced the panel. So let me just dive right into the discussion. Governor, I'll put you on the spot, and I'll ask you the first questions, and then I'll have reactions from both your panels and then our audience here. And simply put, how can you define a real man in PNG? How do you define a real man in PNG? What does it mean? And how does this idea impact beliefs, attitudes? Does it downplay their health, their well-being?
Thank you. I think the role of a real man in PNG these days shouldn't sort of be too different to what it was in the past. If you look at what used to happen in the past in most places in Papua New Guinea, the men were the guardians, they were the bodyguards of their village, if you like, but more so their own families. So if, for example, there was opportunity for gardening or catching fish or gathering of food for the household in our past societies, the men would provide the security while the women would do the collection. In fact, you will often see these pictures in the past where the woman was carrying all the cargo and the firewood and the child would be right on top of the load while the men would be walking beside her, and he'd just probably be carrying a spear and perhaps a club in the other hand. And a lot of people would see that and say, oh look, we're making the women work so hard. But in actual fact, the job of protecting the women was much more important than actually him carrying the load and giving the other responsibility of looking after the woman to the woman. You see what I mean? And I think when you come forward to our society, like modern Papua New Guinea, that role has actually changed somewhat. So perhaps men no longer see themselves as having the responsibility to sort of care for the family unit, to care for the tribal unit or the village unit. And so he has lost his way. I think women pretty much still, if you look at the things they do in the household, some women in fact will have a job where they're working from say 9 to 4 in the afternoon. They come back to the house and then they still cook and clean and feed everybody. So they're working from, I think in the morning, if I may to go even further back, they make breakfast for the kids. And, the man is in fact contributing much less in the household than the woman is. And maybe that's a vestige from the old days where all we did was provide security while the women did all the work. And today, they're still doing all the work, but we're not providing the security. I think that's the way I would describe it.
Thank you, Governor. I'm inviting Dr. Andrew for some reactions. Thank you.
And if you think of Bilum as a body, and if you think of the men's house as a different kind of Bilum, and if you think of the human body as a different kind of Bilum or as a different kind of house, all three of them are containers, and they also decontain. Decontain in an epidemiological sense of securing and protecting. So the viruses that come in, then you have to decontain. That's the work of man that the governor is describing in a different way. There is a very close analogy between the human body, the men's houses, and the Bilum. The men's house is 4 sides or 2 sides. It is composed of male and female substances, just like the human body. We have male and female blood in us, in all of us. So the magic number in all these discussions is 2. And the time is the future. The men's house, the Bilum, and the body is always about the future. And the value, overriding value, is entanglement and discipline. So you find a young man who is without gender. He goes into a man's house which is composed of two sides of the initiating groups. One of them are mothers, and one of them are fathers. And then they turn this non-gendered person into a man. And they set him in a discipline, chart a course for future, precarious, liable, but commanding. So all those values are there. You require discipline to align the mind and the body so that you could deal with issues of pressures, all kinds of pressure, all kinds of precarious situations that you need to work out the balance. And I think getting into the men's house is being able to spot the balance and guide it. You're on a canoe, so you have to paddle it.
Thank you, Dr. Andrew. Dagia, I want some reactions from you. You have very heavy inputs from these two gentlemen. One talked about the Governor Beto man losing his way. Dr. Andrew mentioning about a non-gendered person going to the house and then giving a direction that is done inside the house man. But maybe perhaps from a younger generation, what would be your perspective of that?
I think the question, what makes a real man in PNG, for me, I certainly do see it from quite a different lens than the two gentlemen that have spoken before me. And I think probably given the time and the generation that I grew up in, probably gives me a different perspective from that. In the sense that, both have shared from the aspect of culture and how men from a certain time were guided by culture, and that did in a certain way seep into this modern times that we're in, and we continue to find what makes a real man in PNG. But from a personal perspective and from what I've been able to see coming up, I think the majority consensus of what makes a man in PNG right now is more of towards a negative side than what we'd like it to be. In the sense that I grew up listening to Sapos yung man ba yung paitim bros na senap na toktok at the time. Or you man I gonna play na wakim kain lorot. Or you picking in man toktok strong. You picking in man you fight. And that was all we heard about what makes a real man. And for me personally, as someone who, in all honesty, is the complete opposite of that. I don't like sport. I don't like talking. I don't like fighting bros and those type of things. It put me in a place where I asked myself, if that's what a real man in Papua New Guinea is, then what am I? And I think we found ourselves in a place where we're still trying to properly translate and connect this cultural idea of what a man in Papua New Guinea is, and in terms of what the modern man is, and trying to find that middle ground that we can use to actually truly define a man in Papua New Guinea. And that would be my reflection at this point in time, just listening to the wealth of knowledge that was just shared. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll move on. I think all three of you touch a bit on change. Right? So now I want to reinforce that question again by asking, are these really changing? Or are people, Governor Bed said it really nicely. It's like, this guy is lost, someone is lost. I want us to come back to this conversation. So what do we need for that man to be found again, if I can use it that way? Is change for positive or negative? Are we losing our traditional values? You mentioned about values. These are values. You go into the house man, you get those values that make you become a man. Or are we compromising? When we sing our national anthem, we say we get our strengths from our cultural heritage. Are we talking about the same thing, or we are confused there? Governor, I'll put you on the spot again.
These are actually, to be fair, they're very deep questions, and someone needs to go and maybe do a study and try to understand the different perceptions as to why. So I guess when I speak as I'm fully initiated Abelam, so I would be speaking more from the perspective of what it's like in my society and why we expect certain things to be the way they are. And you know, when I talk about young men being lost, I actually see that in young people. Like when we were growing up, you wouldn't be called a man unless you have to be initiated to be actually called a man. And in my society, I'm one of the last initiated Abelams. You know, we haven't done initiations in most parts of the the Abelam domain in 30 years. So anyone who is in their 30s now, or even those who are in their before their 40s, they wouldn't understand the aspects of the Abelam culture and how it relates to valuing women and their roles and being able to apportion them their rightful place in society. So this aspect that you talk about in terms of changing, I think that we may have started losing our way, and there may be simple things that we don't see as being real influences, but I see alcohol as being one of the biggest influences because it's a foreign item that's been introduced that we've really taken a liking to. But in so doing, broken down a lot of our traditional respect, the things that make us respect other people. Like, for instance, simple things like in my house, man, they'll say this, and if I translate into English, they'll say, "Time you go to place plonabloman in Pidgin, you go to place plonabloman, you must stop, you see, and like you don't go and cause trouble." And to take from what Dagi was saying, young men these days, they think that they should cause trouble. And we need to understand, why do you need to cause trouble? In my days growing up, it was, if you caused trouble, retribution was swift. You'd pay for it right there on the spot. In my society, it would be on the uncle. Like for instance, the job of disciplining my sister's children, that's my job. It's not the job of the father who actually had the child. It's my responsibility. So Kandre and walk in some parts of city called like a wow, walk the wow. So you would actually, if you're a male child, you would be respectful of and fear the discipline that would come from your uncle. Because your father would expect that the wife's brothers would keep you in check. Make sure money and grow up good. So you fast forward to today, and I think alcohol and some of these, quiet influences, they come in without us noticing that they creep in and they've sort of overtaken. So they then break down these links and these traditional, cultural, if my uncle was a drunk, and then of course, then leading to culture where it was his job to do the discipline. Suddenly we became non-existent. And so you come to the modern era and you ask yourself, well, should we restore those things or should we not? Do they still have value today or do they not? Should it now move to, like for instance, in a Western society, the job of disciplining the child is the father's job, not the other. How do we then get young men to sort of recognize that there was a time when these sorts of things happened, and do we want the modern way of sort of raising children, and other countries, like for example in Israel, they stick all their kids into a kibbutz and they start to train them in the Jewish values, and they try to sort of bring them up from there. We send our kids to school, and once we send them to school, it's, well, I'm walking the teacher now. The teacher is standing there smoking, chewing buai, he's drunk, he doesn't turn up. So maybe that's what we are teaching our kids. So I think it's all of these little influences that have suddenly become mainstream. Whereas if you go to a Western country, they frown on people who are drunk. In PNG, there's a young man drunk and pulling busnai blorot na. Oh, I'm hero, I'm over lorot, So the different values that we apportion to bad behavior, not calling it out as bad behavior. So this is the way I see it. And as I said, it's so different. I don't drink alcohol because I feel that it's something that we should not be doing. And so I stay away from alcohol because I think that it's something that makes us lose our connection and lose our discipline to what it is that we are. Sorry for the long answer.
No, those are very deep answers, and there's no short answers to it. So I'm looking at Dr. Andrew and Dagia for reactions as well. Thank you.
I'll play on what the governor said, but I'll use something else to give you a picture. It's about the volume of noise that we used to have before and now. The volume. Right? If you were on the Sipikrewa, life proceeds with a routine and regularity until you have sounds of garamots and flutes coming out of the men's house. And then the routine and regularity of the everyday life fades. And so if you were to play your radios or crack your coconuts or break your firewood, you'll have to take it a little bit far away from the men's house. The only kind of sound that should be greeted with respect and reverence would be the flute music and those kinds of music that comes on. And that goes on for about 8 weeks at the minimum. It could be more. But the laughter and the giggling that you conventionally find in the mundane flow of life fades. And there is a kind of volume of music that is coming out of the men's house and that is respected. And that's the only music that you should have for the next 8 weeks. It comes out only during the night. Of course, the drums possibly can go between the day and the night. But you think about the boombox generations that we have now and the loud music that we have. It's a kind of assertiveness that doesn't respect the borders between our houses, the different sides of the streets that we live in Mosby and elsewhere around. But I think there is a kind of unexamined, ungrateful loudness that greets our young men of these days. Why do we have to be loud? To spread our name, to spread our violence and vengeance. And why have to be loud to be boastful? Is there something valuable in being quiet, being silent, that we have lost? It's too loud in the city. It's too loud amongst our new young emerging Papua New Guineans. Why are we too loud?
I think I just want to reflect on that question of what's changed and then bring it back to this idea of a houseman. And I think, I only ever got to experience a houseman twice, and it was when my father took me to the village for the first time. And, being the grandson of a chief, you have to be initiated. There's a celebration and you enter and all of that. And a few other times that I've gone back. But I think when we talk about this conversation of what has changed, I think of a houseman as a community of men that hold each other accountable in terms of the values and the principles and the characteristics that a man should be positively portraying in the houseman, in his community, and when they interact with people around them.
And when I think of a house movement, when you go in and you hear those stories from your elders, and when they tell you how to carry yourself, you don't only try to replicate it, but you know that they're looking at you to hold you accountable to act in that manner. And I think that as time changed and we slowly started to break away from community and started to be in our own silos as families and whatnot, we started to lose that community of men and or people that held us accountable as men in terms of how we behave. And I think for me personally, in terms of my reflections of how we are today, I think the more that we don't have that strong community to hold us accountable in terms of how we should be, that's what's changed in terms of my opinion of it. That we don't have people telling us that actually that's not how you should be, or that's not how it should be. And we have fathers and grandfathers and uncles who stepped away from that space where they were held accountable, that now don't feel that they should be able to hold us accountable as well, because we've broken down in terms of that practice. Now, I'm not saying that it's not possible in the modern era, it is. It's just a father being able to actually put someone in line and saying, this is how you should behave. But at the same time, it's a communal responsibility to say that this is how it should be. And for me, when I think of changes in society and how it affects us, I think we've gone from a time where, as a community, we hold people accountable, to a time where actually I'm only at how looking and what it is.
Thank you. I think three of our panelists mentioned a couple of things that caught my attention. First, we talk about accountability, we talk about lost values, discipline. You talk about the culture of silence as well. I want to bring into the conversation aggression and how that links to masculinity. An example given by a young gentleman there, he talked about, these days, the boombox generation days, it's all about noise, it's all about who's the loudest, who's the toughest. How does that play into our conversation of being a real houseman? Do you can still associate aggression with being a real man in Papua New Guinea? Or this is just a confusion that we are getting ourselves into, that we need to change, this possible change that we should be looking at. Maybe this time I'll start with Guillermo before we go into Honorable Governor.
I personally do not associate being a real man with certain negative traits that people think is what makes a real man. For me personally, in terms of things like aggression, I find it difficult to find a connection between someone who's overly aggressive and being a real man. And that's just my personal experiences. Maybe at one point in time, aggression and being a man made sense, in terms of being able to show that you're able to protect your family and being able to show that you're able to be the one that people look to. But I think we've gotten to this point in time where people have misconstrued that, and they take it a step further in terms of how they should be carrying themselves. And so for me, certain negative traits I find hard to connect to what makes a real man. For me, it comes down to the values and the principles and positive characteristics that they're able to use to inspire those around them and to lead their families, their communities.
See, violence and aggression are natural dispositions. And it's about how you make use of that energy, that dispositional tendency that makes it explosive, or something that means something else. So if you think of in traditional terms, every men's house is a battalion. Every men's house is a trained army of warriors waiting to go on war. And aggression is latent. It is waiting to be used. It is waiting to be commanded, to be given direction, and to achieve certain outcomes. And I think we have exaggerated its tendencies and put them to different kinds of use, different kinds of values, different kinds of things that do not really protect us, do not secure us, expose us to precarious negotiations. You have to constantly negotiate, fighting with your neighbors, fighting with your drunkard friends, or fighting with your wife, and so on. So what you find in a typical men's house would be a group of army. And you are trained, including trained to fight. On the Sepik River where I was initiated, we stand for a few hours with one leg up, carrying a spear, without responding to the bites of mosquitoes, without responding to the irritation caused by the sweat running through the scars on our bodies. You move your eyes and you're penalized. There's a soldier being trained, but who are you going to fight? That's the point. And why do you have to fight? And often when you fight and who you choose to fight are people that means something about your future and your security. And I think our future and security is being misused for something else about loudness and assertiveness that makes us less than who we are.
Yeah, I think because I'm Sepik, I come from a houseman too, so I concur with, look, my ancestors were all warriors. My grandfather killed over 70 people. He was a tribal war chief. But he never hit his wife. You know, that would be regarded as the same person. I mean, even today in my village, if there was and in most parts of Bilum society, if a man hit his wife, his group of compatriots, his peer group, all by same lost up on the man. It would bring shame to them that this lamane by the meri, you know, everyone would sort of avoid him. So therein lies the deterrent in the misuse of aggression. There is an expectation that if you have an external aggressor, you would meet that external aggressor with equal, sometimes even overwhelming aggression. Like in my place, they will say this all but and they'll watch, you know, they'll watch the person causing trouble until it gets to a point where the entire community will respond, and the response would be overwhelming. So it's about how we as a modern Papua New Guinea see aggression, use aggression, and whether that aggression is rewarded by our actions. You see, you look at Papua New Guinea right now, there are certain places where, you know, if you're unhappy with something, you're gonna cook in this building. I mean, that's an act of aggression. Or you go and attack these people and you burn their houses and, you know, you kill people. That's an act of aggression. But I think to some extent, our tribal groups have given up their right of defense to the state. So if they were to retaliate, there'd be some kind of penalty. But more than that, I think the instruments of state are also compromised. You got one-talk system in the state. So, for example, if you know, if two groups fought, and then the police stand up, and the police happen to be related to the troublemakers, well, the police will be. We all know this. Their natural tendency is to support their own one-talks, as against these people who have, and they become victimized a second time. So the unnecessary liberal use of aggression and violence in Papua New Guinea, I think even from a state perspective, can be rewarded, and largely it's rewarded. So if one group is unhappy about something, or go cook him house, or they burn down a courthouse, or some state property, no one gets penalized for it. There is no overwhelming force to meet that aggression. So I think there's a message that gets sent out to society that, well, this is acceptable. So I think the young men who are growing up, young Papua New Guineans, they see that and they think, okay, I'm looking more like, there's 50 guys that came, they all fighting mania, kill him, they did all these things and he's still running around. So maybe it's okay for me to do it too. So I think these massive disconnects in not just societal systems, but state systems. And you see, our system is actually composed of equal and opposing parts. And like Dr. Motu said, Nibla Civic, we employ violence. There is overwhelming retaliation. But when you give that up to another authority, that authority needs to be seen to be active. So we've got to restore those sorts of things. The state needs to assert its authority. So if young man bigger this time, come and grab him all, pull him out, and set them right so that they know that yes, I can use my aggression and my force, but there is a bigger societal deployment of aggression and force that's going to be employed against me should I do these things. And I think that's important because 30 years ago, the village solved its own problems. Today, we are expecting the member to do it, or the police to do it, or the church to do it. And it comes back to the original thing that, I'm not sure if Dagi said it or Dr. Motu said it, but it's about this responsibility, being accountable. Who is accountable now? And what whose job is it to police these things? Is it society? Is it the police force? Is it the member? Is it the public service? Who? So at some point, and I think having conversations like this is important because we start to ask those questions about, okay, a couple of weeks ago, I had a tribal fight between two villages, and it got quite nasty. 60 houses burned down, 7 people killed. But what I did was I got on my phone and I called the ward members in both communities, and they put me on speaker, and I spoke to the communities and I got them to stand down. I had to intervene, and there were no police there. Basically the village leadership was overridden. Again, that's a deployment of massive aggression. But these intermediary mechanisms, the respect for these intermediary mechanisms, whether they be parents, village elders, all of these sorts of people, I'm not sure if they've either lost their authority or it's been given up, or whether they've just been overridden. Maybe there's too many young people. They tell us that 60-70% of our population is under 40 years old. So maybe there's too many young people, and those of us who are older, we no longer have control over this. Like personally, I can't say it's this, that, or the other thing, except to say that, yes, I see it breaking down. And in my point of view, I'd like to see it restored. You need order. You need to control these things. You need balance, I think, to use the other word that was mentioned earlier. There needs to be balance in all these things. And, there's simple things like personal respect. We had the story about boomboxes. If you're going to play your music, respect your neighbor. Play it just loud enough for you to listen to it. You don't have to play it so loudly that everyone is trying to compete to have a conversation, or the guys in the next house cannot even hear themselves. So these basic, simple rules of respecting other people as respecting yourself, and then again coming back to this, I'm one of those people that believes that the state should be able to deploy its force against any tribal group if it is warranted and if it is needed. But it comes back to the state being able to have its agents sort of act like they are neutral in the argument. They don't go and take sides with one or the other. They come in, they deploy the force, they solve the problem, and they do that instantaneously. And I think if you do that, then generally I think young men will see that there's a consequence to the liberal use of violence and aggression.
Thank you, Governor. At this juncture, I'm going to open it up a bit to our audience. If you have questions to the panel, I know there's people joining us online. If there are questions coming through chat, please send them forward so I can also pass it on to the panelists. Otherwise, I can go back to the panel to start again. All right. Okay. Great. So you looked about the old society. We had controls. There's an accountability mechanisms or systems in place. We have now, left that to the authorities. But then in a state that has failed, we cannot control these things. That's where I'm hearing the response coming from. But I'm going back to my questions: aggression and making the real man in PNG. Yes or no? Or it's hard to answer. It has its place, maybe. Does aggression associate with strong masculinity or define a man as a real man in Papua New Guinea? He's saying no. You two are saying there's a purpose for it. It depends on, as long as there's a form of accountability to it. I mean, there was a study done that, just to put it into context, 70% of women who are disciplined, I'm using the term here, by their husband, say that it's acceptable. But then when looking at the space of gender-based violence, it is not right to be, hitting a wife or something like that. So that's where I'm coming back to. Is aggression has its place in being a real man in PNG?
Well, I think in the family situation, certainly from my society, it's never acceptable to beat up a woman. I mean, the term meri man actually comes from that. If you beat up a woman, you're regarded as less than a man in my society. So it's not. But if you beat up another man, there's an argument and you settle it. That's fine. It's acceptable. So it's the context that also needs to be looked at, and I need to be shown a society where it is acceptable for women to be beaten by their partner. And I'm not sure if that is a traditional value. But if there is, someone needs to show that to us. Or is it just the modern definition of how that ought to be? But at the same time, I think, you look at young people generally, they have a lot of energy, and if that energy is not channeled properly, and it comes back to, what I guess Andrew said and I said, which is, all these things are inbuilt. If you go to a houseman, the quietest person in the houseman is usually the most aggressive. Certainly in my place. And so the quietest one is the one nobody messes with, because that would probably be the person that is the person who talks the most is actually the spokesman for the village, not the one that causes the damage. That's somebody else. And what I find in my society is that, the ones that used to be involved in the front line fighting and killing, they're usually the quietest ones in the village, and they're the ones that are never in front during peace negotiations or discussions or houseman conversations. They'll be the ones sitting at the back. You fast forward to today, and usually the aggressive one is the one also with the big mouth. So there's a disconnecting in terms of how the use of violence in society is coming about. And I think if you go all around Papua New Guinea, and they'll tell you the one that can deal extreme violence is the quietest one. So what we have today is something that is totally foreign. It's a hybrid use of violence and loudness together. Personally, I think we can change it. I mean, you look at our fellow Melanesian brothers, the Fijians. They're not as loud and they're not as aggressive as we are, but you see them on the football field. They're world beaters, So, again, you know, you put them on the football pitch and they transform, they become something else. They use their aggression to achieve an outcome. You know, it comes back to the earlier point I said, how are we rewarding aggression? How are we using it? You know, if we can stick all our aggressive young men who are really good at beating up, you know, their friends and their partners and whatever else, if we could deploy that on a rugby league field or, you know, so to sort of, that would be very nice, I think. But we can't even do that, you know, we can't even do that. We're very good at beating up defenseless women in the house, but you put us on a football field and we're hopeless. Anyway.
I think our question comes around to resolving the idea of an instinct. And I think ultimately it comes to worrying about the spillover effects of how we use those things that grow out of instincts. So again, if you imagine Yonki, it's just the Ramu River coming all the way from Kainantu, you know, running through past Morobe, Bedeng, and eventually ends up near to the Civic. So the PNG Power decided to put a big dam there and transform the energy of this river into electricity that we now have. And I think we all have aggression. We all have tendencies to explode. And we all have pressures of all kinds to deal with, including the pressure to have our name loud and pronounced. I think being able to channel that energy is what we have to strive for as a nation and as an individual. Being able to channel our energy to outcomes that bring us respect and honor.
I still am of the same opinion that I gave in the very beginning. Unfortunately, I'm quite hard-headed, so that would be a bit difficult to change. But I do have a reflection in the sense that after listening to both Governor and Doctor, I think times have changed, and so certain characteristics that were acceptable to be part of an arsenal of the men's characteristics have changed as well. You know, I think back to our ancestors, and surely aggression was part of that man's character, because he had to protect his family, he had to protect his village, he had to protect his community. And I think some of those things in terms of being able to protect from enemies and neighbors may not necessarily be the same. And that's why, for me still, when I think of, does aggression make a man, I find it difficult to find that connection. I have a grandfather who passed away that I looked up to so much, and to me he was the ideal of what the man was in my family, but there was not an aggressive bone in his body. I think in terms of aggression, it's human nature. Everyone's going to get aggressive at some point in time. But I think in terms of a conversation of whether it make it the man or not, it should not be something that we try to measure and say that this should be there and part of that conversation. So I personally still feel that, yes, it's human nature, but it definitely is not something that defines what a man is or who a man is. Maybe at a certain time it was part of that arsenal of characteristics that our man had, but I think times are changing, context is changing, and so characteristics that we have with men start to change as well in terms of how we see them.
Thank you, Dagger. I think this is fitting for us to draw this discussion to a conclusion. So before we wrap up things here, I'm going to give a few remarks from you to your passing words. If you are going to, leave a message to whoever is listening to this conversation, what would be that one message that you leave behind in terms of being a real man in PNG? And then we can wrap up this discussion.
I would leave this analogy like 25 years ago I went to my village, and my villages in South Wasara, they were like the champion hold-up kings of the civic highway, and I was embarrassed by it. So I had a conversation with my cousins and everybody, and we tried to change that. Today it's probably the safest stretch of highway in Civic province. But the thing I said to my cousins was, I said to them, what you're doing now, you're using weapons, you're holding up vehicles, this is how you're earning your living. Is that how you want your son to also earn his living? Do you want to see your son standing up there on the highway with a shotgun holding people up? And that simple conversation changed in fact, it changed an entire region. And that's what I would say to the young men out there. The way you are behaving now, being loud, being aggressive, fighting bros, doing all these sorts of things, is that how you would like your son to be, beating up your partner's mother, your partner, your child's mother? Is that how you want to see your son also behaving later? So I think that is something that every person who aspires to be a man needs to confront himself with. And if that answer to that question isn't the one that I'm expecting, then obviously we're in trouble. But you look around society now and you see that there's enough violence. And in fact, there's more violence in our society today than there ever was in the past. So these are the sorts of things and I think we need to confront ourselves and constantly confront ourselves. And the generation that is here now that finds that acceptable needs to change, so that the next generation that is now being raised will see the value in behaving in a quiet manner, in channeling their energies towards something more positive. Perhaps they will get an opportunity.
I think the big question we all have to ask is, what kind of a future are we dreaming, and how can we secure it? See, the violent and the aggressive are active, and those who are the recipients of the violence and the aggression are non-active. So there is a contrast here. So earlier on I introduced the metaphor of loudness. Now I'm introducing the idea of being active and being non-active and dreaming a future. See, when you are dreaming, you are active, but you're simultaneously not active. And I think we might possibly learn something out of dreaming a future. To dream is to get out of your life. You have to get out of your life into another life and come back to yourself. And to dream a future is really actually not a nightmare of aggression and violence, but to get out to a life ahead of us and come back to ourselves, like dreaming.
I think my parting words would be, there's so much conversations about really helping young men change and become citizens that we're proud of in terms of who is walking the streets and who's leading us and who's standing up in front and talking on behalf of us. And I think as we try to achieve that through having conversations like this and doing awareness and going out and doing so much. I think there's so much power in being able to start that process from the home. And I think if there's a father or a big brother or someone who is that figure in the house or in the home, to actually start that process of being that good example, start that process of healing, start that process of holding the men in your life and in your home accountable and building it up from there. And slowly having that replicated out into our communities and out into a larger stage. I think as we have these conversations of positive male role models and positive male behavior, let's start by actually taking it back to our houses. Start by taking it back to our homes and to our lives and actually living it there and then taking it out into public. And I think that would be what I'd like to say to anyone that's listening.
Nicely said, nicely said. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of the conversation here. At this juncture, I'll thank the panelists for very insightful words of wisdom. And thank you all, people watching online and also our audience here. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever Haus Meri discussions. Haus Meri is a space to discuss the changing expectations of women and their roles and their place as women and girls in PNG society, and what these changes mean for their rights and opportunities to make decisions over their bodies, over their own bodies. The right to the autonomy of bodies means that we have the power and the agency to make choices without fear of violence or having someone else make decisions or choices for us. A woman's power to have control over her own body is linked to how much control she has over other spheres of her life. This year's theme for the State of the World Population Report is My Body is My Own, claiming the right to autonomy and self-determination. As mentioned earlier, a woman's power to control her body is mainly linked to how much control she has over other areas of her life. So we're going to look at, we have our panel members here. I'd like to introduce our panel members. We have Marcia Kalinoi. Just introduce yourself. And then we'll hand it over to Jennifer, Sister Jennifer from the Midwifery Society. We also have Claire and Yanamlin. They will just briefly introduce themselves before we kick into the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marcia Kalinoi. I am the Program Coordinator for the Family and Sexual Violence Section Committee of the CIMC.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jennifer Peralia. I work at Port Moresby General Hospital at the maternity wing, and I'm the president for Papua New Guinea Midwifery Society. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claire. I work for different organizations. So a lot of my work is in non-academic research in the space of politics and policy.
Hi everyone, my name is Yana Miliana. I work with the PNG Tribal Foundation as the Citizen Passing Campaign Coordinator.
Thank you. And we're so privileged to have our four panelists here today to discuss the important issue of bodily autonomy. Okay, so when we talk about bodily autonomy and women having the power or the agency to have control over their bodies, we're looking at how much control women have over their lives and over decision making, over the decisions that they can make in their lives. So Marcia, how is PNG society and culture changing? And how are these changes affecting women and adolescent girls in PNG today?
Thank you so much for the question, and it's great to be here for the first ever House Mary session here today. And that's a really interesting question, and I believe a lot of women, young women listening in today would probably be reflecting on their journey and how far they have come in terms of how much control they have over decision making in their lives, and I believe it's greatly influenced in terms of their family spheres and how much support is given to them in terms of how they would in terms of their ability to make choices and make informed choices for themselves, and it's greatly influenced a lot with introduction of education coming in, the opportunities to access information, education, services that are available within their vicinity. A lot to do with people interaction and relationships that they build with those that they are exposed to. Most times girls have been kept within their own family circle and they don't get that much exposure, but I believe over time we're seeing that we have that opportunity to come out from our homes and be exposed to education opportunities and even workplace. Now women are now able to be employed, so stuff like that. I'll probably pass it on to my colleagues who might want to add on.
Thank you and good afternoon, everybody. I'm very privileged to be here, and I'm really proud to talk about women and girls' health. I work at Port Moresby General Hospital for 45 years. 45 years, and I'm retiring in 2 weeks. But this is God's willing, because I really want to talk about women and girls in this country. Papua New Guinea, the training hospital in Port Moresby, we deliver 50 to 60 every day. And that includes teenagers as old as 11, 12 years old. And really hurts my heart. And we also run the clinic. We also have an operating theater in the maternity wing, which is like a hospital, maternity hospital. And we always run out of resources. We always run out of nurses and midwives and doctors, because Port Moresby does not have any other public hospital, only Port Moresby General Hospital. So we try our very best to do that. And when I see teenagers, especially between the 11, 12, even 6 to 10 too, admitted into the gynecology ward, it really hurts me. Do they have a guardian? Do they have a parent? Even the parents, even the family members are accusing them, doing all those things that you and I do not expect. So this is a very important launching, Bilum launching. We are going to talk about women and girls. Bilum is also the uterus that the baby grows. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to take this project to the country to make sure that 89 districts, they train midwives, and they train nurses, they train house meri, they train waiting house, all those stuff that this country is lacking. And you know, the woman is the source of life. The Bilum we are trying to launch is the source of life. If we don't have girls and women to the right age and with guidance and with the right channel, Papua New Guinea will not have a population. I travel the world to learn and get all this information, and I see that a lot of the countries around the world are going stagnated like us, but they look up to the leaders. So I'm really proud to be here, and we will take this to the parliament so that we will get the 89 district MPs and the 22 governors to head on, so that we will look at maternal health in this country seriously. Thank you, UNFPA.
It's great that our mother here had touched on the Bilum, because your question is how much change has our society gone through, right? And we should see that in the evolution of the Bilum today here in our country, right? To be able to then look for those answers. I remember a couple of weeks or a couple of months ago, I came with a friend of mine to see Dr. Motu, and he touched on the issue of Bilum and gender side by side. And I asked him, based on your experience as an anthropologist, and you're surrounded by so much of our history here, what's been uncovered and unearthed, where is the oldest Bilum found in PNG? And he said, oh, it's found in Mekio in Karikou. It's like, oh, okay, that's very interesting. How many years ago was that? He said 1935, 1936. He's going to have to confirm that. And I can send the actual article that he worked on. So, and the thing was that the traditional Bilums that we use, they use natural fiber, right? And so now the Bilum weaving has evolved to synthetic fiber. And that whole journey in itself tells us a story about how much our society has been changing as well too. And where women fit into the evolution of the Bilum as well. So just wanted to just throw that out there into the conversation.
Thank you. So I think my colleagues have already shared a lot. I'll come from the village perspective because I grew up in the village, and seeing the changes that has happened, we can say that technology, we have progressed from that Stone Age where our ancestors lived, now to this digital age, and information is something that is readily available, especially to the population that is, within the urban centers. And if we look at the changes that has happened over time, it has also affected women and girls as well in terms of the knowledge they have about their own body and the rights that they have towards their own body. Unfortunately, that knowledge is not present in the 80% or the 70% of the population in the remote areas. And when we talk about women having a right to their own body, we also have to be conscious about the population who are in the remote areas. And that means that the 80% are still walking in the footsteps or walking in a direction where it's encouraged by tradition, it's encouraged by culture, it's encouraged by what the society holds, where they come from. So having that consideration and consciousness about how our culture and tradition affects how we think, how men and women view women and girls in the community, it also affects our conversation around women and girls having power over their own body. Because culturally, women are viewed as something that is part of the larger clan or larger tribe. They are viewed as some kind of commodity, which I should stress is not supposed to be that way. Women and girls are supposed to be viewed as members who are independent, who have their own view, who have their own mindset, and focus on how they can tap in their own potential to be able to contribute better to the community. So when we talk about women and girls having rights to their own body, I grew up in the village. I didn't know most of this information that I know now about my own health in terms of like menstrual cycles or my right to my own body, what I should do, the changes that are happening in with my body. So it was something that I had to learn as I experienced each stage. And as privileged as we are with the information that is available right now, that shouldn't be the same issue our women and girls face in the communities, as we should be able to share this information wider in the community. And so with the talk around this, it is different in urban areas and also different in rural areas. So having all these factors into account, the changes that has happened in this span of years since colonization, now independence, and now we are here now. It is very vital as well to look at all the factors of changes and then factor that into how we can help women and girls understand their role, their placing, their rights in the community. because we have to be honest that the man has to be on this as well, so that they understand that their women and girls, their daughters are not just women and girls, they are actually vital members of the community and the society.
Yes, thank you, Yanamlin, for that detailed discussion. Yes, and rightfully said, as she rightfully said, the tradition has a lot to play in the changing roles, changing culture, changing roles of women and girls in our societies and communities as a whole. Also, we need to, when we're looking at the changing roles of women and girls in our society, again, as Yanam Lin had mentioned, we need to contextualize our rural setting from our urban settings and see where there's a balance. We need to be able to balance. There needs to be understanding as well. We need to involve our men, bring in the men into the picture, and get them to also understand. So a lot more awareness needs to be done in these areas so that there is a lot more understanding and buy-in. Okay, also, what Marcia said earlier about the roles of women and girls, you have a lot more girls going to schools. You didn't have that before. The retention of girls in school was high. So a lot, girls were seen as, you know, they help their mothers in their villages or in their homes. And you'd see a lot more boys would tend to go to school. But now, with the influence of technology, with the influence, the Western influence, we see a lot of that has changed. And though we have all these influences, there is still unequal gender norms and attitudes, okay, that lead to this power imbalance in relations to women's decision making in societies, in communities, even within families as a whole, as a unit. Okay, intertwined with bodily autonomy is the right to bodily integrity. And this means, you know, people can live freely within our society from, you know, free from physical acts to which they do not consent. So while many women and girls in the world today have the power to make autonomous decisions about their own bodies, there's still many more women and girls, including in PNG, that still face a lot of constraints. Okay, some with devastating consequences to their health, well-being, and even potential in life. Okay, the potential in life. Even some of these can even prove fatal. So one way of understanding gender-based violence is that GBV is an act of violence done generally against women and girls without their consent. So I'd like to start with Yanam Lin here. What is consent? What do you understand by consent, and what should consent look like in an intimate relationship between two partners, or a couple?
Thank you. First of all, I am not married, so I will not be able to give a, you know, that intimate point of view, but I have grown up in a family where I've observed in communities, and a family where my parents, how they communicate, and I've also observed in my relationship with other people, relatives in the community. And I want to bring for context, to how a society is structured. Most of our villages are structured in communal, kind of system where decisions are made by people who are revered in the community, and when that decision is made, everyone kind of, follows it because they respect the person who is giving the instruction. And when it comes to that area, some of the decisions are made in a way that it overlooks the individual's interest in the community, and that may include women and girls as well, and the issues that they face. Consent to me is, in the village, again, I'm coming from the village perspective, is agreement between a man and a woman to do something, And with this, in this context, I'm meaning married couple, right? Married couple, where they have consent to do something, or they agree to do something at a certain point in time. And I've seen and I've observed that many in the community have that, they do not fully understand what this means. In the village, when someone gets married to, when two people get married, the husband thinks that, or the other part of the party thinks that they own their wives or they own their husbands, and whatever they say is that's it. And most of the time, our women in the village do not realize, but they experience, marital rape in their homes, and they cannot speak out freely about it because they think that, oh, this is probably it. They don't have information about how this is wrong in their own marriage and in their own family. So they think that, okay, maybe there's some families, maybe the wife of this other person might be experiencing the same thing, or it might be something common in all the men, and it becomes like a taboo that no one wants to talk about. And as a result, we see women who give birth every time and they don't have family planning as a result of, continuous, activity that happens in the bedroom. So women don't understand the importance of having planning and when to have that, intimate conversation with their spouses. And so it poses a threat to the health of the woman as well, because the more she gives birth, the tendency of her becoming sick and possibly leading to that is very high. As I've seen a lot of women who do that, who have, fallen victim to this in my village. That's in Kaintiba, that's at the border of Gulf and Morro, but very remote. So if we are serious about this conversation, I will be straightforward that this kind of conversation needs to happen within families, right? Engage the man and the woman, put them together in a place where they can learn about these things. Because I think that the women and men who are married, who come into a place where this information is shared with them, they will start to understand, okay, men will start to understand that this is the time that I will do this, and this should not be the time that I will do this. And this is what the law says about, what kind of actions that I've taken against someone else or my wife in our homes. So conversations like this needs to engage parents or married couple who are serious about having this conversation in their own families, so that we can have understanding around this issue, so that it doesn't become an issue again that is talked about 10 years from now, because then by then we know a lot of people have knowledge around this. So
Okay, thank you for your comments on that. Yes, that is true. A lot more awareness needs to be given to engagement as well. A lot of male involvement, as well as relationships and communications between husbands or partners needs to be needs to be clear, as well as extended family members who are also part of the community, the society. In the PNG society, where we tend to define family as not just the nuclear family unit. We also have, our mother-in-law, father-in-law, brother, sister. We all live together in a household. So you find that a lot of the decision-making is not just between a couple. It also extends to families, and families that influences a woman's decision process, the woman's decision-making process. So I'd also like some comments from feedback from the other panel members on what they understand about consent, or what consent means to them.
Yeah, just adding on to what you said about the design of the PNG household, which is not your typical Western one of father, mother, and the children, right? There's the first cousins who are also your brothers and sisters, and it's sometimes very difficult to explain to someone who doesn't understand your culture that that's your brother and that's your sister. No, not the same father and mother, but they're brothers and sisters. Oh, how does that work? And then you have to go into this whole, okay, this is the context from which I come from, and this is how we come together and connect, and where the decision making also comes into it. But with the issue of consent in intimate relationships and the decision making that's rested upon the entire family, I think there's not really, to be honest, because us as Papua New Guineans and as Melanesians, we kind of get a bit, what's the word? We shy away from those intimate things. When you're talking about consent between a husband and a wife, and something like, discuss it within the privacy of your own room or whatever it is. It's usually the conversation that happens on the side. So if you were to really look at what the most simplest understanding definition of consent is, it is giving permission to, agreeing to something. But usually in order for permission to take place or an agreement to take place, both people need to have some level of understanding where they're able to make that informed decision that would then empower them and give them the authority to give that consent, right? Now, if we bring it back to what our mother here was saying about girls as young as 11 and 12 at Pomgen giving birth. What's her story? What is her story? This little 11-year-old girl, was she aware? Did she make an informed decision? Did she give consent? So when I embark on an intimate relationship with someone else, I want to make an informed decision that gives me the power and the authority to go, okay, I understand what your expectations are. These are also these are the lines that I'm also drawing as well too. So you better make sure that you work around these boundaries and these lines, and I'll do the same as well too. It's a give and take. So that's what consent means to me.
Okay, thank you. I'll say something. Looks like I'm the most experienced person among the group. Yes, consent. Okay, what I can share here is what I see in Papua New Guinea, some parts of, especially the islands. The bride price, when they pay a bride price. To me, and maybe most of us, we know that when you pay bride price for a young girl to be married to someone, it is like they're using the woman like that's their property. So we are seeing black eyes when they refuse sex. Let's not talk about sex openly. We are talking about giving consent is having sex. Some people, some couples, they just want to have sex for pleasure themselves. That's why family planning comes in. Family planning comes in because we want a number of children and what you can afford for each child. Not just to have children for pleasure. That's a very information that we have to get across Papua New Guinea, because we are attending to women who had a child last year within 6-7 months coming again, even 3 months coming again. It really hurts to see young girls and women who are having baby one after the other. So that's a very important information that we have to get through so that people will make decision of their lives, what is their future like. Not a girl just to have baby and look after the kitchen. God made each and every one of us at potential. You see? So that's what I think, because I, for myself, I came to Port Moresby in '76, right after independence. I had my own choice too. I didn't want to get married. But my father saw the bride price, so he forced me to get married. But I got married to a very good man. He's a retired medical officer, so we understood each other. And here we are four grown-up children. So that's the way to go about. You have to make a right decision to satisfy each boy and girl, man and woman, everybody else. Not talking for the tribe and not talking for the other family members, because they're not going to be with you when you are dying on sick bay. Thank you, everybody.
Marcia, we have our last comment from Marcia.
Thank you. Yes, this is an important conversation. What does consent mean and what is not consent? Is it okay for you as a young woman to say yes? And what happens if you say no? Are you aware of the consequences of when you say yes? Are you aware of the consequences when you say no in terms of making an informed decision? And I think I agree with what my panelists have said. They've covered a wide range of areas. But I also like to bring the conversation to what is not consent. When you hear about consent, what is not consent? If someone is saying yes, but their body language with maybe their tears running down their eyes and they're looking upset, is that consent? Like, what exactly does it mean when we talk about consent? And we had a couple of definitions already on what is consent. And when you look up the literature, there's about 4 or 5 different examples of what consent is. And I think the idea of this conversation is trying to point out what exactly is consent in terms of being informed and knowledgeable about issues. What would it mean if you were to say yes? And do you have the ability, are you able to say no if you feel that that is not the right thing for yourself? I think that's my take on what consent is.
Thank you, Marcia. That was really good to hear about, having those different definitions of consent, as well as knowing what is not consent. We also need to really observe those other body languages, signs that, though your body, though you may physically or you may literally say yes, your body language says something else. And again, that may be because a woman doesn't feel as empowered as she should. She probably feels threatened or maybe feeling coerced by her partner. That's why she says yes, though you still see tears running down her eyes, or you still see that her body language does not consent to the act. Okay, and in PNG, as we discussed, the panelists had discussed earlier, men are seen mainly in PNG as the head of a household, and often they hold all the power to make most of the decisions in the household or in their families, and that also includes issues relating to sexual and reproductive health. So again, it's not just like I mentioned in the first question, it's not just within the family unit that decision is being made. It extends to mother-in-laws, sisters. As Sister Jennifer had mentioned earlier, we have a bride price system in the PNG culture. So once bride price is paid, women are sometimes, they're seen as a commodity or a piece of furniture, or your voice, the woman's voice does not count. So she does not feel as empowered as she should when there's some form of bride price made, and this is again linked to culture and tradition. Okay. So consent is closely linked with the ability to make decisions again over your own body, your own health, fertility, and sexual experiences. So Jennifer, what do you think are the main barriers or the challenges for women when we talk about women's fertility and women's sexual experiences? And also, how does this also relate to adolescent girls?
Challenges. Thank you. Challenges are, we always know that girls are the weakest in the family. Yeah? Female is the weakest, especially when we are talking about Papua New Guinea. Men seems to be the strongest person. So that's why we have to work around within the family and the community to make sure that they have the equal right, especially in decision making, how many children they want, what they want to eat, what they want to spend if they are any, or how to do their garden. So I feel that both should contribute to making their decision to run their own family. Thank you.
Marcia, if you could also add a few more comments to that, and we'll go to the other two panel members as well.
Thank you. I guess some of the barriers And challenges would be ability to access information and services. Sometimes it could be a cost factor that maybe she doesn't have the financial capabilities to afford a bus fare, or something like that, to get to her destination. Or it could be that she is taking time off work, and so it might affect her her pay or something like that. So it could become a barrier to her accessing information or services. It could be the distance that she has to travel. It could be, we're talking about safety in a lot of settings. The safety is not guaranteed, or she can't travel alone, or there's a lot of barriers that could come in affecting ability to get to a certain location. Also in terms of quality services, reality speaking, it's not the same across the country for various reasons. Resources not equally distributed, and workforce. A lot of us choose to work in towns. We don't want to go home and serve our people, and so it also affects young girls and women's lives. And how are we giving back to our own community, to our own homes, to our own family members? I think these are some of the challenges that we see.
Okay, just to add to, just to further on my question to Yanamlin and Claire, I mean, also if you could just discuss further on the barriers and challenges of why women would not be able to make decisions over their fertility and sexual experiences, women and young girls.
Thank you. That's a really big question. I think parents have a great responsibility in educating their children, both men, boys and girls, in telling them about the changes that happens to their parents are the first teachers, I should say, for short, that they educate their children when they're old enough to understand the changes that happens in their body, to their body, on the use of it and the time when it's supposed to be used, and all this very important information. But the problem is the parents are too shy to talk about it. So, for example, if we are talking about educating the masses, like, those already in school, right? Primary school, elementary school, they're old enough to understand this. I was in grade 7 when I learned about personal development, and my colleagues, or the girls that I went to school with, who were in grade 5 and grade 6, some of them fell pregnant grade 5, 4, 5, and 6 before even reaching that course in grade 7. So it's a bit like they miss out on the information before they get to grade 7. They fall pregnant in grade 5, grade 6, and then they miss out on the course, which is in grade 7. And I was fortunate to reach grade 7, but not most, young girls in our village, they reach grade 7 or 8, or even go to high school. Most of them fall pregnant in grade 4, 5, because we grow faster than our male counterparts, or boys in the community. So I would say educating the parents so that they can educate their kids while they're young is a way forward to really helping female children in the family understand when they should say yes, and at what age they should make these decisions about getting into a sexual relationship and all of these things. Because and then the woman then will understand what time she is ready to have sex, because when a woman hits puberty, like, she is ready to be a mother, even though she's 15 years old and she sees her period, that shows that she is ready to be a mother. Or some, they see their period as early as 13, 14 years old. So if she's 13 or 14 years old, she is ready to be a mother. If she is not properly educated on her right and when to engage in a sexual relationship, she can fall pregnant at that age because she doesn't know that she can get pregnant if she starts to see a period. So if, like, for parents, it's a huge role for them to start educating, really, really tell their girl children that, yes, you are able to give birth when you start to see your period, but that doesn't mean that you should start having sex during this time. You wait until you are these years old. You are, say, 20 years old, 25 years old. Then it's not also about age, it's about how mentally equipped you are, financially. Are you already ready to have children? And like sister said, are you able to have children and then readily ready to finance them and their needs? So all of this comes into play. So if children can learn about their body and how it works and what time they need to use their body parts, if that's the right word, as to for certain, activities that are designed for, then we will prevent all, these unnecessary, not unnecessary, sorry, I take back the word, unwanted pregnancies that happen in the communities or in our families. So yeah, educating our parents to educate their children is, I think, will be a good way forward.
I think you will have some comments from Claire before we can round off this.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm just gonna throw bits and pieces of stories here and there, and we, the audience, can judge for ourselves if it kind of informs what are the barriers and what the factors contributing to it. But I still can't get over just the 11 and 12-year-old girls that get pregnant and give birth at the hospital. And so then when someone brings it up in a conversation, someone who works in the hospital, do we then ask ourselves, okay, what is her story? Why did that happen? And is it our business to know, to help identify what are those bridges and those factors? Another conversation would be it being an economic issue now, right? Having children. And there's different conversations that we have determine how much we know about the type of informed decisions we want to make that's in our best interests. I hope I'm making sense. Like, for example, when I talk to my particular circle of friends who are obviously well aware and are well informed, many of them who are heading towards their 30s now still don't want to have children because they're in debt, They have bills to pay. They still have they have responsibilities to their families, whether it's bread price or house cry, a whole bunch of other stuff, So maybe it's a conversation that they have with their partner, if they do have one, to go, okay, we'll delay in, getting married, doing things in the biblical sense, and maybe having a child until maybe later on, because I think the average amount that it costs to have a child in Port Moresby would be about, 20,000 kina annually? I don't know. Well, there's a statistic that we need to check, but these are just assumptions that are thrown into conversations, right? So we can debate and we can contest to then make even more informed decisions, where the statistics and the data also informs how best we can navigate this world and try to live a better quality of life. But then what happens is that when you go to a family gathering, oh, you're turning 30 now, and the two of you have been together for almost 10 years. What's going on? But this is supposed to be a bedroom conversation, right? So in the modern context, that's how we would be thinking. But it becomes their business too. You guys need to get married now, and you need to decide if it's going to be a wedding or a bride price. And if it's going to be a bride price, we need to have a clan meeting and discuss what's going to be the amount and all these things. But there's always a price to pay for every single decision that is made by the collective, isn't it, in this country? And I'm sure you all have your own stories to tell. But it also frustrates them. And then so when some modern Papua New Guinean women decide that they're going to delay having children, and they're probably like 35 and they still haven't had a child, the judgment on them is very severe. You know, it makes them less of a woman, you know, by the family members and the collective. So, and then there's also the issue of, I'm just going to throw it out there, over-glorification of masculine values in this country has been going on for too long. And what are some examples of that? Mimanya, boys will be boys, is another accepted one that we have to subject ourselves to in order to cater to what is in their best interests. So while our words are saying yes, our body is saying something else. And then we're speaking in a language that they don't understand. But we understand their language very well. Where's the middle ground? You know? So, yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Yes, to wrap up that discussion, yes, there are a lot of challenges that we face. And again, it's deeply rooted in culture, tradition, and then also with technology and the changes in Papua New Guinea that we are seeing. We have, you know, our parents that find sex as taboo and don't talk about, so they don't talk to the children openly about sex education. And then we at schools, even our teachers are not properly, you know, trained to talk about sex openly, and so we need to have a lot more comprehensive sexuality education for our young people. So they need to be more aware of their bodies and, you know, their you know, anatomy, so that they can make, you know, better decisions. You know, you have sex one time and you can't fall pregnant, so you may not have known that, you know, that is the reality. And when you do fall pregnant, there are other issues that come with that. You have cost issues where you may not have bus fare. You may live far away from the nearest health facility, which is 3 hours maybe by vehicle. Probably no road access again. So again, there are those barriers and those challenges that one cannot meet, especially as a young girl. And for women, again, we have our societal challenges. Again, you know, from what Claire has mentioned, a lot of young women today, we have power. We're empowered. Women are empowered to say, no, let me delay having a child till I'm 30 or 35. But then again, we have those cultural influences or family influences that can make us feel less of who we really are. Okay. So we're going to go now, move on to our last question now. On having children, on women having children. So in PNG, having children is often seen as a central place for women in our societies, in our communities. Is this changing? I know we've somewhat answered that in our previous question, but is this changing? And what are the consequences for women and girls? I know Claire has lightly touched on that, but we can delve deeper into it. We have a few more minutes to go before we can end our meri discussions. Okay, I'll start with Claire.
Is it changing? Oh, I mean, when we talk about change, we all speak from a place of, what is it? I always have to check my privilege first and then ask myself, who am I speaking on behalf of? Who exactly am I representing? So this question that I'm going to answer, should it be more of an individualized response to it, or am I speaking on behalf of Papua New Guinean women everywhere going, it is changing, you know? Because the reality is something else, isn't it? Is it changing? Well, I did share about some of the conversations that I've been involved in, where those of us who are transitioning into the next decade of our lives, the 30s, you know, are still going, we're going to wait. And that's because I think my freedom and agency and the privilege that was given to me to be enlightened and know that I have power and authority to make those kind of decisions started to an extent in my home, because my father made sure of that, you know. He made sure that it was more my father than my mom. So I'm telling I'm making myself valuable to you by telling you a story about my household and how that's kind of shaped the reality that I see about change, where women are concerned in making decisions about their own bodies and their own lives. So my father told me at a very young age that, he wanted me to be better off than the society that he was brought up in, where you have the very traditional woman from our community who was there to serve hand and foot her husband and her clan and his siblings and his mother and father, and the list goes on, from church to every single gathering. That was my mom. And so my dad made sure that education was very important for me to be able to see that. So today, at this current stage of my life as an adult, for me, I feel like it is changing because I have more power to make my own decisions because of the privilege and access that's been given to me by those who set those foundations. And so when Yanami was talking about it starts in the home, it really does. But then, the place in the home to how much privilege and access and information and what is the context of that setting anyway to determine that process of change that each community or each family group, goes through. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. So I'm gonna keep it short. I'd say that giving birth, having a baby is a good thing. Really, really good thing, because I've seen it brings joy to a lot of people that I've been part of. I'm not encouraging you to go and have babies right now, but the distinction is if you are ready, right? Ready to bring another person into this world, it's a rewarding thing. I'm not, like I've said earlier, I am not married, but I have observed people who have children that have brought, life into their lives, and it really, really changes, someone's life. With that being said, is it affecting, or is that changing? Are women having, more rights to, say, I'm gonna delay this process until I am this, and then I'm gonna get married? Well, I'll say that it's different between in urban areas and in rural areas, because in PNG we have to speak on both contexts, because majority are living in rural areas, and it is sad to state that majority of the rural communities who have no access to road, no access to, so in that case they don't have that right to say that I'm gonna make this decision on my own when I'm ready. That right is taken away from them. Whereas in urban areas we are seeing the rise in women empowerment and the key messages of women having authority over her own body and making decisions on her own behalf, on whether they should settle down, have children or whatnot, which is, I believe, we are seeing it progressing, as I've seen a lot of women that I know who are successful in their career and are not married, and that shows the work in this space that have reached them, and these are the products that we can see. So there's two different scenarios that we can see, and of course we can applaud that in urban areas women are progressing. They have advantage over information which informs them to make their own decisions, whereas in villages where a girl, when she reaches, even she cannot reach she's not yet reaching her 15th or 16th years, but then she's given away to a man, and that's two very contrasting stories in our country, and it's time that we look more closely into finding a way on how we can bridge that gap as the years go by.
Can I just say something? We're talking about change. Yes, it is changing. But to those of us, especially in the medical field, Papua New Guinea, the Majority is still way back out there. And they need a link. They need professionals, especially health workers, nurses and midwives and doctors. But our district hospitals are not working. Road network is not working. So this is the information that we have to get to the authorities so that we are really in business. Okay? That's what I think. Those of us in the cities and in the towns, yes, we have a clinic, we have hospital to go, but what about the majority? They're not getting the health information, they are not getting all the education they need to. So that's why we have to get there with the authority. And one thing I want to share here too is women's reproductive health is ready between 18 to 35. You don't have babies below 18. You don't have babies over 35. I have got a daughter too. She doesn't want to get married because she says she hasn't met the right person, and she's 36 years old. So those things are going on. So we have to be truthful in what we are saying and mean what we mean, so that the whole country can get information about what we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just be very brief. I think it's a really good question, and I would just like to say that in terms of changes, the reality is when a woman decides or is in a position to decide for herself, most times society thinks that something is wrong with her, and that's the reality still happening today. We also don't think about, and I want to refer to what was said about the underage. Is it okay for a 12-year-old to be bearing children? And what has she missed along the way? What information could have helped her to decide whether she could have that pregnancy or not? And unfortunately, a lot of times, even though we may be health workers, we may be advocates, our personal bias comes in that we tend to tell them, pregnancy it's a gift, it's a joy and all that, but we don't think about the consequences for her health and down the line in terms of the future of the child. So it's a conversation we have to have today, and I'm glad that we have this opportunity now. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. That was a really good comment on, and knowing whether this 12-year-old is able to make that sound decision to have that child with all the information on information that's available to her. Again, we took it from the rural setting and into the urban setting. We looked at our culture. We looked at, the changes that are happening in today's society and how we're, as P&G, we're trying to, also adapt to those changes. But we also need to keep in mind that a lot of our rural communities, they don't have this awareness or they don't have this information. And that information it needs to get there. Young girls, like we said, they all got susu and they start seeing their menstruation. You have communities that have, they have some rituals where when a young girl starts her menstruation, they celebrate it and they say she is now a woman. She can have children. She can now be given away as a young bride. But P&G also has enacted laws that we have in the country. We have the Look Out in Pikinini Act that protects the child, the girl child as well. We also have other laws such as the marital rape law. We also have policies like the FP policy, sexual reproductive health policy, as well as GBV strategy that we have that allows, it has a lot of information that we can give to our urban communities as well as rural communities, so that they know when it is right to have children, the consequences of having children at age 12, that leads to maternal mortality, as well as other indicators that we really need to improve in our country. We also need to ensure that a lot of family planning awareness is, given to our rural communities. It may not be accepted in some areas, but other methods may be accepted. So, a lot of more education needs to be given to our people. in the communities as well as urban areas. So achieving bodily autonomy depends on gender equality and expanding choices and opportunities for women, girls, and vulnerable groups. And also we need to ensure we contextualize it to our setting in the country, in PNG, to our societies, and down to the community level as well as to our family units. Further, since claiming bodily autonomy is fundamental to the enjoyment of all other human rights, such as the right to health or the right to live free from violence, institutions in our societies are obligated to extend all the support and resources required for us to carry out our choices in a meaningful way. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you to the panelists. Also, thank you to our online viewers for your attendance and listening today. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon. How are we all doing today? Well, my apologies, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Maureen Orea, and I'm your host for this afternoon. Apologies, I'm catching my breath. As you all know, I'm 36 weeks, just so you know. So, again, today is a campaign launch for the Bilum campaign, and it's something remarkable because it's in line with what I'm going through, one, and two, it's also something that every woman in PNG goes through, which is reproductive health. But I'm not going to talk more on it. I will introduce Dag Wagner to come on to the stage and say a few words. Let's make him feel welcome.
Thank you. Okay, afternoon true. Good I can all see you from up here. I'd like to welcome all of you here today for the launch of the Bilum campaign. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Honorable Governor Alan Bird from the East Sepik Province, Honorable Charles Abel, member of Alotau. We have with us today the Attorney General, Dr. Kwa, many excellencies, ambassadors, high commissioners, development partners, colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be here today and to witness the launch of the Bilum campaign. This extremely important campaign is launched by the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, that is part of our country team here in Papua New Guinea. More specifically, UNFPA is that agency among us that is specifically focused and advocates for sexual and reproductive health, which is an extremely important topic, and it's really at the core of our collective efforts, and much remains to be done on this front. Recently, the UN Secretary General pointed out that the unintended pregnancies have risen due to the COVID pandemic. So it is one of the unfortunate side effects, which is so detrimental for women and girls all over the world and also in Papua New Guinea. You may recall that in July this year, a very sad story has been reported in the PNG media. There was a young girl who was pregnant, a teenage girl, and she bought herself a drug on the black market, misoprostol. And she unfortunately passed away because it was an illegal and unsupervised, medically unsupervised abortion attempt. She didn't have any access to any reproductive health services and passed away. But there are so many other nameless cases we can hear about. You know, there's that 16-year-old girl down the road who's again pregnant. There is that young mother of 3 who has been abandoned by the husband and who has to fend for herself. We all know these stories. They all happen in our neighborhoods. And I want to mention a few very unfortunate statistical facts to you, which will help us to fully get an appreciation of the issue we're actually dealing with. In Papua New Guinea, more than half of all women, 56% of women 15 years or older, have experienced some form of physical violence in their lifetime. And 28%, so almost 1/3 of them, have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. And this violence is overwhelmingly committed either by current or former partners, husbands, boyfriends. And the next figure is something which really strikes me and continues to struck me, is that 70% of women, but also 72% of men believe that somehow it is justified to beat the wife under certain circumstances. So it's not just the perpetrators, who are often male, who believe it's justified. It's paradoxically also the majority of women who believes that under some circumstances their husbands are justified in beating them. So it's all about perception, it's all about our own attitudes. Global findings also show that teenagers are at a much greater risk to experience family and sexual violence due to their age. And teen pregnancy is obviously just as much of a problem. It's a violation of child rights, and it perpetuates the cycle of poverty and violence we can see in some of the statistics. But it doesn't need to be this way. I think we've all already rallied around gender-based violence big time here in Papua New Guinea, and I think rallying around sexual and reproductive health is another step in that journey. It also requires us to challenge our norms and our behaviors, our social norms. And this Bilum campaign, which is launched here today, is actually launched alongside the UNFPA State of World Population Report, which is the annual flagship report by UNFPA. And it puts again square and center the right to bodily autonomy and self-determination, which is so central to this whole question of sexual and reproductive health. Only if adolescent girls and boys, men and women, can make decisions over their own bodies, we can put an end to unplanned teenage pregnancies. So what are the key 3 ingredients we need to make a change? Firstly, we need a radical change of our mindsets. We need to transform our attitudes and think about some of the beliefs and some of the societal norms we have. Because too often there's a lot of stigma, and there's a lot of stigma around teenage pregnancies. And that's also the reason why many teenage girls don't seek help, and why they get access to illegal abortion drugs and then put their own lives at risk. Secondly, we of course have to continue to improve the relevant policies and the regulatory framework. We need the review and the finalization of the adolescent health policy, which has to go in tandem with the education policy to ensure that all adolescents, children, be it in school or out of school, have actually access to the knowledge about their bodies and awareness how to protect themselves, including from unwanted pregnancy. And then thirdly, we have, of course, quality reproductive health services which must be ensured. There has been too little investment in health services overall, and especially reproductive health facilities. There are no longer enough doctors, there are no longer enough service providers there are no longer enough midwives to really cater for the needs of a growing population. And that brings me to the last part of what I want to say, to where we actually headed. If you look at current predictions, the PNG population will rise to approximately 13 million by 2050, if not more. Currently, we don't have exact estimates, but that's the best estimates we have so far. So taking that population growth into account, we have a real challenge, because it will put additional demands on services which are needed. And so we are all called upon to change that trajectory and actually provide sufficient services when it comes to sexual and reproductive health. The United Nations, as you know, together with our government partners and also civil society and NGOs, we do offer already a broad range of services. And all investments are extremely important, but some of them are, of course, critical. We need to address the barriers that prevent young people, especially women, from becoming active contributors to PNG development. and teenage pregnancy is one of those barriers they may face. Only if we offer those adequate sexual and reproductive health services, we can actually ensure that they remain active agents and help Papua New Guinea achieve its national development aspirations and also the SDGs. But for that, we need to reflect, and we need to reflect on our own attitudes, on our own behaviors, our own thinking. And a good way of doing so, and I think that stands in the middle of this event today, is also to reflect about the past, to look into our culture values, and to look what the past can teach us, because often it offers very valuable advice and guidance on how to solve some of the future problems. It can guide us. So today, you will all have the opportunity to participate in a series of discussion about those norms and those values, how we can review and address and rethink our attitudes towards addressing sexual and reproductive health, because that's really at the very core of what it means to be human, at the very core of our well-being. So I invite you all today to explore new entry points which are being offered to us with the support of UNFPA through the Bilum campaign, to let the wisdom of the past guide us to create a better and a sustainable future for Papua New Guinea. Thank you very much.
A very insightful welcome speech there for us. Thank you so much. That's the UN representative, Dirk Wagner, for that talk. But of course, we'll move along. We've got our Attorney General also here this evening, and we'll also make him welcome up here for his address to all of us. Let's make him welcome, Dr. Eric Kwa.
Good afternoon. I see the Governor for ECPIC, Honorable Allenberg here. It's very shameful. I'm not part of the government, but I'm just trying to recall Charles, and I'm thinking, my colleague to say the right name? Sorry, my brother. Mr. Hebel, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I know that both of you were in Parliament and you were debating Bougainville, and I left early, and I know that you just came out from Parliament and came here because of your commitment, because you support the cause. And so both of you are very strong leaders who have taken up the initiative at Parliament. And so I'm really happy that these two leaders are members of the Parliamentary Committee on GBV. So please let's give them a hand. Thank you for standing up for us in the leadership fora and speaking on this issue. Dirk Wagner, my brother, good to see you. The host of this building, Dr. Motu, thank you for having us. I can see Acting Secretary, Community Development, thank you for being here with us. And all the excellencies, our friends and our partners who are here, we're all in the same big agenda called GVV. I know that today we are here to talk about the Bilum and about women, but I also think that it's also about the whole family, the whole community. We're just dealing with one component of it. And so I thank you for being here with all of us. I am pleased to be here and to represent the government of PNG in this UNFPA's launch of the Bilum Campaign and the 2021 UNFPA State of the World Population Report. Both the campaign and the State of the World Population Report are founded on human rights, equality, and participation, amongst others, as principles that bind PNG, a country of more than 1,000 tribes. The spirit of the Bilum Campaign is enshrined in the preamble of the PNG Constitution. When we declare that we, the people of PNG, acknowledge the worthy customs and traditional wisdoms of our people, which have come down to us from generation to generation, and pledge ourselves to guard and pass on to those who come after us the noble traditions. On the other hand, the theme of this year's State of the World Population Report, as Dec has mentioned, bodily autonomy and self-determination for all people, including young people, is aligned with the PNG Constitution's emphasis on basic rights, that all persons in Papua New Guinea are entitled to the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual. These rights are also embodied in the Medium-Term Development Plan 3 and the Papua New Guinea Vision 2050. I already read Dec's speech, or let me just say, I took note of the points raised by Dec. In my response, I can reaffirm the importance and urgency of addressing these critical challenges, as these are also integral to our aspirations as a people in this nation. Connected to this is my strong advocacy for two important landmark efforts of the PNG government. First is the passage of the Women's Health Protection Bill, which my department and our stakeholders are developing at the moment, because we want to ensure that women have the right to choose. And that's something that we're working on, and I hope that we can be able to get it through this parliament before they rise in April next year. Let me pause to thank UNFPA for its support. And that's being funded by UNFPA, and so thank you so much for helping us in the government to bring this bill to fruition, hopefully before the end of the year. Another is the plan of action to address the concrete recommendations of the Special Parliamentary Committee on Gender-Based Violence, following an inquiry that has shown a light on the scale of need and what needs to be done in this country. And again, let me thank our two leaders who were here. I was in Parliament when Mr. Abel presented the report, and I can assure you that all our leaders at the Parliament floor actually rose up and spoke in support of our Parliamentary Committee on GVV. So again, thank you to our two leaders for taking the leadership to highlight the issues that confront us every day. I believe that high-level political leadership remains crucial, holding all duty bearers accountable to ensure the equal rights of women and girls. At this point, let me pause and explain to you a little bit about two incidents that happened recently and that affects the law and justice sector. I know that a lot of people have raised their concerns about a non-custodial sentence that was given to a woman, to an accused who battered his wife to death. So on the instructions of the Minister for Justice, we have now called in the public prosecutor and asked him about what he's going to do. So I'm happy to announce that the public prosecutor has agreed to appeal that sentence, that a person must be sent to jail, can't be out on a non-custodial sentence for the murder of a woman. We've also raised the issue with the public prosecutor in relation to the incident in Mount Again earlier this week. And the public prosecutor has agreed that he will recall the file and see if he could file a ex officio indictment, something that he has the power to do. And so we are hoping that he can exercise his discretion independently to reinstitute proceedings against the person that was released this week. We're also aware of the cases that appear before the committal courts, appear before the National Court, and the minister is very concerned about it, and the minister has been pushing for reforms at the JLSC. JLSC is the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. The Minister for Justice, Honorable Brian Kramer, is the chairman of that committee that deals with the discipline of judges, appointment and revocation of appointment of judges and magistrates of Papua New Guinea. So we are really happy that he's taken the leadership to try and improve our performance as a law and justice sector. We're also working together with the police and the public solicitor and the CS to improve our services. So I can assure you that at the law and justice sector level, we do meet on a regular basis to try and address some of the issues that confront us every day. But of course, we need the support of everyone out there, all our partners, because the issue is just too big. And not only a group or a small group of people can do it. All of us need to do it. I can also assure you that while we in government are the primary duty bearers, let me reiterate this point. Important call to our partners from civil society, including women and youth organizations, faith-based groups, media and the academia, the private sector and development partners, to continue to provide support to champions and role models to ensure that quality reproductive health and GBV protection, information and services are provided to the people of Papua New Guinea. Some of these champions and role models are with us in this afternoon's launch, and to them we pay tribute as well. And again, let me pause and talk about something that I'm involved in with the Digital Foundation, where we're going out there in the communities and looking for heroes, men who stand up against violence. And I'm happy to be one of the judges. We're looking for men who can be recommended by communities who know that this man has stood up against violence within the community. So we promote these men and women as well. Because much of the time, we at the leadership level, we get all the brunt of whatever is good or bad, but we forget that there are a lot of champions, both within families, within clans, within communities. They're out there that we need to identify and encourage. And so I'm happy that the private sector and the NGO sector are picking up this challenge as well and helping us as a government to ensure that we send a message across to everybody that we need to protect everyone in our families and in our communities. And so in that context, I can assure you that by tomorrow, we're going to close off our regional consultations on the amendments to the Family Protection Act. We have picked up the recommendations from the Parliamentary Committee on GVB, on some of the reforms that we need to make to that act. So we have now completed our regional consultations by tomorrow, and I am hoping that we can bring the bill across to Cabinet the next month, and hopefully again get the amendment to the Family Protection Act before the Parliament rises. And I think we can do it. One of the amendments that we're trying to bring is that when a complaint is lodged at a police station against family sexual violence, the women will not withdraw the complaint. That complaint must see to its completion in terms of prosecution and whatever the outcome is. That will actually prevent women from being pressured by maybe the husbands, their boyfriends, their relatives to withdraw a complaint. Because once they withdraw, we can't do anything about it. So that's something that we're trying to include in the draft bill. The other one that we want to pick up is the issue with channeling. When the family members witness violence and they don't come forward and the victim suffers, we want to hold the family members accountable as well. So it brings the message back right into the family, right into the community, that you can't accept the beating of a woman because of what Dick has just said. 70% of women and men who think that, yes, it's a right to build a woman. It's not a right. It's wrong. And so we're hoping that that's one of the suggestions that we bring forward to government, that if a family member witnesses and does not do anything about that violence, they must also be held accountable. So it encourages our people to come forward, to report and to try and reduce this problem in the country. And so that's the effort that the government is taking to respond to a number of the things that are happening in our community. We are mindful of that. We cannot do everything at one time, but at least we're doing something that we can, as building blocks, hopefully over time, particularly with the emergence of the Parliamentary Committee that has just taken office this year. I mean, they started last year, but at least this year they've come forward and with the leadership and in government as well, and then down to all our partners sitting here, and those who are listening and those who will be watching us. If we can all hands together, we can reduce this problem in this country. Papua New Guinea is a beautiful country. Papua New Guinea is one of the best countries in the world. I have to say this, because this is where we are going to live and die. I love this place. And so we want to create a place where it's safe for all our children and all our girls and even boys, that in 2050, if we arrive at that point, Papua New Guinea will be a much, much, much better place. And so we thank our leaders who are sitting here, leaders who are out there, our leaders in the communities, in the families, who are doing the bit to improve our country. we thank you all. We thank you for joining us together with all of us, both in government, in opposition, wherever we are, in addressing this problem that one fine day we'll be all happy. And so in closing, on behalf of the government of Papua New Guinea, I invite you all to join the United Nations, and particularly UNFPA, in officially launching the Bilum Campaign and the 2021 State of the World Population Report. Thank you for listening, and let's keep going with the battle.
And now I will give this time to the lady of the hour, our UNFPA rep, Mary Sanders. Let's give her a round warm of applause. Thanks a lot.
Attorney General, Governor, Member of Parliament, Excellencies, distinguished visitors from Goroka, distinguished guests, good palavinun. Today we go back to the beginning, before PNG became an independent state, to appreciate how tribal cultures approached the subject of reproductive health. It was never a hidden topic, but it was a sacred one. In fact, the origins of the word taboo is believed to mean that the topic should be treated and approached with respect, not that it should never be discussed at all. In the beginning was the Bilum. Literally, the word Bilum means womb, so the two are intertwined. We are birthed, nurtured, and buried in a Bilum. But this doesn't happen alone. We are born into communities. The Bilum becomes a metaphor for our reproduction and our relationships. Often, when we speak of development, we forget our development hinges on our relationships with those closest to us, the ones that we rely on to guide us and to teach us how to navigate in life. In the past, this responsibility fell to village elders, women and men who took their roles seriously, marking rituals of passage with rites and ceremonies because they knew it was important to reinforce social norms, to prepare the way for future generations, and share knowledge that will make us collectively healthier and stronger. The Bilum patterns were a way for women to communicate to a broader community about the milestones and challenges we pass through on our journey through adolescence to adulthood and beyond. So today, this is a story about hidden treasures, waiting to be told. It's the story of women in PNG, the ones that are hidden even though they are all around us, just like our Bilums. But tonight they are visible. Tonight they get a chance to shine. I'd like to invite you to listen to Florence share with us the deeper meaning behind the Bilum and the patterns, and then I'll be back in a little while. Thank you.
In Papua New Guinea, a tradition that is significant and that is at the heart of PNG culture is the Bilum tradition.
So when you say Bilum, you know it's woman, because Bilum was taken from the womb of the woman. It's derived from there. Bilum is a woman thing, and Bilum is woven by a woman. The fiber is twisted by the woman. Everything is woman. The designs are created by the woman. So when you talk about Bilum, it's a woman thing. There's designs that tell the story about women also that is in there. It talks about the weaver or the community. You can know which belongs to the Goroka people, which belongs to Hagan people, which belongs to the Upper Highlands people, which is a Morobe Bilum, which is a Medang Bilum. It's basically the brand that tells which community owns this design. This is the ovary, the fetus, like the ovary design. Some say fallopian tube, some say ovary. It's to do with the women's womb. It was believed to be created in the maternity ward of Goroka General Base Hospital by nurses there. It caused a lot of talk within the town, and then the police went around getting scissors and started cutting out the bilums, saying that why do you have to design the woman's, private parts outside? And being a woman at the womb, it's a sacred place. The police went around and they started confiscating the bilums, and then they ended up at the police station. And then they came to a weaver and they asked the weaver, like, why did you do that bilum? And the weaver said that no, it's not the fetus. And she started saying that it's the letter D. So she had to put out the letter D to identify that, and she justified the design there. But then she had to tell them, like, you're not gonna cut my bilum. It's my bilum, it's the letter D bilum. The weavers got very frightened, they didn't want to do this design, and they said that, okay, now if we're not allowed to create the DD design or the fallopian tube design, then we will create the computer design. So they named it computer. Some Goroka weavers got up and they said, okay, we're going to do the Gaisi design. So they call this the Gaisi. It started from DD, the fetus, the fallopian tube, then it developed into the computer, then it developed into the Gaisi. So that's how nobody wanted to weave it again. So you rarely see the fetus design anymore because they are afraid to do that. It's called diamond because it represents woman. And women in the highlands and let's say all of Papua New Guinea, women are treasured because we get bride price out of women. They're valuable to us. That's why it's called diamond. So the diamond design it's basically a traditional design. It differentiates the women, the younger girls, from the married women. For example, if my daughter just became a young woman, just past the puberty stages, now we put her in the little house meri, and then we keep her away so she doesn't come closer to the man or come closer to the father and the mother or the family. So it's the mother that goes there and feed them, and the aunties. During the whole week, people go singing, and they celebrate her, passing on into being a young woman. There's two links that goes with the diamond. There's the half diamond and there's the full diamond. So the diamond one is the one that is the very young one that is coming out of the house meri, and the half diamond is the one that is accompanying them. So they will know, they put the focus on the diamond one, knowing that she's the one that they should be thinking about their, son or something like that. So it's a different story that align it together. So that's a design that hooks up the women rather than the men. So if you're a man running around with a diamond design, thank you. You're supporting us, the women. This is the spider bilum. It talks about patience, talks about do not rush in things, and you just need to take time, be patient, and you complete one thing at a time. See, it starts from the pink and then it goes round and round, so just like the web of the spider. So it connects the spider with the weaver. There's this weaver that was teaching the daughter how to weave a bilum, and as they were weaving, the daughter, she had to twist the fiber, learn how to twist the fiber, then she has to weave it. The daughter kind of was tired, and then she was very impatient. So she started, sitting down, and she was looking around, and then she saw the spider up there, and then she said, "Mama, why can't we be like the spider and just finish it off? Just complete the bilum, hurry up and let's get it out of the way." The mother got up and then said, "No, You cannot complete it in one day. The spider can complete the web in one day, but for you, you need to be patient and you need to complete it. It will take you weeks, days, months to complete it. It depends with your speed, but it is better to be patient, and you need to know that man, you meri, lining lo work in Bilum. So that was how the spider web was created. The skin pig design is more like a trademark that we use as our story, and it talks about who we are. It talks about women in a community or in a village, let's say in a village. The marginalized women and the women of higher status, when they say big mumu in a village, the people of higher status, they come in, bring in the pigs and all this for the party or for the mumu, while the women that are, let's just call it as women with no value, but are living in the village, the old women, widows, women without husbands, single mothers. In common in Goroka language, we call it ghetto. So this kind of women, they're the ones that will bring in banana leaves for the mumu, and there's these elephant grasses that we use to go around and cover the pit. Then they're the ones that peel the cows. They're the ones that fetch the water from the creek, bring it back to the mumu place. So the ghettos do that. The skin pig design is a story that talks about the ghettos. So when the pig is removed from the mumu, the heads and the arms and the legs and the backbone and the breast are given to people of higher status, leaving the greasy part of it that is attached to the skin and is laid down. So they then get knives and then started cutting it up into square. They cut it up into square like this. They cut it up in square like this, and then they give it to those ghetto weavers, ghetto women. There's this one woman, an old woman who is a widow who doesn't have a husband, and she was there, and then she was given the bead. Then she had the bead, and then she was sitting by a round house, the round hut, and she was sitting there, and she was watching all those people dancing and singing and celebrating, and she started singing and chanting, and she was saying like, I really want to eat some meat, but I can't have that meat. Who will give it to me? I'm left. Yes, I'm left with the greasy part of it, and I can't have that. So she was, in fact, she was so worried, and she was singing and crying and, telling them that, like, I don't have my children, I don't have my husband to give me pig, but give me the meaty part of it. I have the greasy part that I will have to have. So she took that, she just sat there and she was chanting and singing. So that was how the skin pig design that was created in Goroka. I'm in that category. I don't have my husband with me, and so it tells my story. I want to do something that will support them. So that was why I created the design here and the skin pig design here. So it's very painful, but I had to bear with it so that we tell the story, and it's more like a campaign against mistreating women, treating women like they are second class and all this. We all have to be the same, and like even though we don't have a husband or we come from a poor family, we are widows and all this, we deserve a space in the society too. So that's how the skin pig design is taken forward by Goroka Bilum weavers as our story about how our grandmothers, my aunties, and like the old women back in my village are treated. The mountain bilums, it tells the story of women that live in mountainous places, that do their gardening and go to their, like in Tokpit Haus Peak. It's basically the route that the woman takes every day to go in through the bushes to go and do the gardening, look after their livestock, fetch water. They live among mountains. So this old woman, at one time sat there, and then she could not climb the mountain anymore to go do her gardening. So she just sat there, looked at the mountain, and then started, singing and chanting and saying that, where else would I go to? This is my place. I belong to the mountain. So she started creating the mountain design to tell the story that that's her life, that's where she belongs to, and that's where she will live and she will die there. When I left my husband, I left everything and I walked out with only 8 kina. I had little children who were basically small, and I had that 8 kina, and then I had to think about feeding them. And I was ashamed to ask my family and friends to help me, because already at the time I was popular being the Bilum Meri, and then so I basically was like bankrupt and doing nothing. So I had to revisit the skill, and the only skill I had was Bilum weaving. I didn't have any skill that can get me employed to do some work. If I can do Bilum dresses and all this and Bilum, and then I'll do that. I made my life through that. My journey started again. The women that I collect now and that work with me in the network are women who are marginalized. The community think that they have no value. The women, they think that they run around the streets and they are problem women and all this, but no. These women are real women, because right now these women are selling their Bilums, they're exporters, they're taking care of their family, they're educating their children. They get the money from the Bilum, they're educating their children. They're paying for their health bills, medicine, and their hospital. We work more like a pyramid now. So one is employing another 5, 10 women again under their network to be Bilum weavers. So every time when we want to sell, they come in with more Bilums because they have their own women that are working for them again. So if we look at our society today, it is more like we have the culture and tradition there, and we have the Western influence there. So it's just the same as Bilum. Bilum, we weave all the designs together. We do weaving and looping. So we twist the fiber, we create a loop that's from the weaving technique, and we join the designs with the normal house and the pause and all this. So it's weaving everything together to create something. So if we look at that, and if we look at our life now, we have to adapt into that. Have the traditional there and the Western there. So if we put them both together and blend it together, and if we want to move forward, we have to stand united together. It's just like weaving the Bilum. We create a bag from weaving together. We start from the bottom, we weave it all up together, and we finally have a Bilum bag that can contain something in it. So it's just like in a society today. If we put the traditional and the cultural beliefs together and objects together and work together with our modern society, then we will create something that has got something in it. You see, it's a nation that we will build, and as the saying goes, united we stand, divided we fall.
What a moving video, don't you think? Yes, fabulous. Now, I'd like to invite Florence and Andrew up to the stage. And Andrew is or Dr. Andrew Motu is the director for the National Museum and Art Gallery, as well as Florence, better known as Bilum Meri. So I'll invite them up here on stage. I'll ask them a question or two, and we can also get some of you to ask them any questions that you have in mind as well. We'll start with the men of the hour. And I just would like to ask our Dr. Motu, in your passion, you have passion in history and you have also passion in culture, which has given you the position to be the director of the National Museum and Art Gallery. How does this video resonate with you in your own words?
I think if we think about the messages that came to us this evening and about the video also, I think the overarching moral framework is about care, and I think The entire program is driven around a commitment to care and a commitment to care about securing our future. And I think the Bilum is built around those principles of tensility and absorptive capacity, the weight and the pressures that are brought about the exigencies. And it is modeled upon of course, the capacity of the womb to expand as the child grows or as the fetus expands in the mother's womb. And so I think the first message is about care and caring about a secured future based on sexual health. An underlying message also is that what happens privately has public consequences, and that young people might not want to enter into relations in which their social and physical makeup is not yet ready to accept. The consequences are humongous. And I think the story that we've seen is a story that begins with an original binding and looping of two stretches of fiber that resonate with the release of the eggs from the ovaries via the fallopian tube. So those tubes are like those two fibers also. And so if the womb comes close to the Bilum, they begin with two fibers like the fallopian tubes. And I think pondering about how they are taken out of that initial bind of intimacy and proceed into an entanglement of looping and knotting, weaving a fascinating story of intricacies and intrigues is what the Bilum is about. And life is equally as intriguing and as intimate and as a Bilum is. I said that I noticed the thread and the needle. I think in the Central Highlands in the Melba, it's a big story about the rope and the needle that comes from the bone of the flying fox. And the cutting sessions sort of mimic the sexual movements of couples in cutting. And eventually, as it comes out, they said that the Mocha exchange partners, which form a network of trade alliances. You'll be the rope and I'll be the bone, the needle that weaves a binding future.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Motu, for that. Florence Avinuntro. So this is your story, and we really all appreciate each and every Bilum that we own. I can say that just by looking around the room, there's every single woman in this room carrying a Bilum. I'm wearing one. And but we never knew the patterns had a meaning. What does this event mean for you personally?
Thank you, Dr. Motu. Well, actually, we don't seem to realize and appreciate the art and that is around us, the cultures and the traditions that we have. So it takes time, it takes a lot of research. It takes you to go back, visit the villages, visit the elders, start talking to them, start understanding where you come from. You need to know your origin. So being known as Bilum Meri, it made me want to know, like, okay, I'm known as Bilum Meri, and what's with Bilum? So it made me go back, visit my aunties and actually I'm from like a mixed parentage of Sipik and Goroka, so I grew up in Goroka, so most of my time is spent there, so I had to go there, visit them, visit aunties in my work and, try to work around things to put one-on-one together and understand and, get to know all this. So, like, every Bilum has a story to tell, and thank you to Goroka Bilum Festival, which is the first Bilum festival in Papua New Guinea, which was, founded by myself. And so with the support that I get and, a lot of advice from the National Museum through Dr. Andrew Motu and J.K. McAtee Museum, working in partner with them, trying to make sure that I'm on the right path. So yeah, every Bilum has a story to tell, and it's a woman thing. Like the men, they have bows and arrows and shield and all this. The women have the Bilum to work on, apart from their household chores like gardening and children and all this. So 12 years of hard work with Goroka Bilum Festival doing research that has brought me this far. And not forgetting the 20 years of the Bilum journey that I had. Wanted to convince people that we can do it. I can defend Bilum, I can look after Bilum. So maybe it's time to stand up now, work with our leaders and our communities and our cultures and traditional people that are behind us, especially the museum. It's time to stand up together and protect that. But not only Bilum, we have to start visiting the baskets and other stuff that will be losing their traditional knowledge very soon if we don't look after it.
Two different sides of the coin, but all equaling to the same direction and the vision that we see for this launching, the official launching of the Bilum campaign. I'll leave the floor open to anyone that would like to ask a question to this too. And if you have any questions, I'll give you 3 minutes because we are running out of time. And then I'll ask Mariel to come back up to say a few more words. Anyone has a question?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, particularly UNFPA, and the wonderful work that you do, and trying to tie all this together, and of course, including weaving it back and touch back to our wonderful and noble culture, and some of the deep underlying themes that we seem to have forgotten and seem to have lost our way, and finding ourselves today in such a predicament that we're all trying in a unified fashion to address and recognize. And so I'm not trying to give a speech here, but I'm supposed to ask a question. But first of all, thanks so much to Florence. Can we give her a round of applause? She's the star here tonight. And I just wanted to put it back to you, Florence, in your work and touching back to our roots and some of the themes in our culture. And how do you think it relates to the current problems today and where we have seemed to have gone wrong? And what can we find looking back to our culture and our roots, particularly in the Bilum culture, that can perhaps guide us back to the right path?
Okay, you can go past. Okay, yeah. Well, yeah. For me, if we look at that, we have a lot of Western influence here in the country and our people. And from my understanding, I'll actually say that I've lived a life that is with my family back in the village. I grew up in the village. I live with my, Olapun Blomia. And I've heard them say a lot, like, in the past, when we have a house meri and a houseman, that's where everything, the house meri and the houseman, they educate their children. The women and aunties, they teach the young girls. The men and the fathers and the uncles teach their young men, to be a better man, how they can stand up to defend the village, how they can look after their wife and the children. And in the house meri, the women are taught, the girls are taught how to look after their husband, how to plant a cow, how to plant, food in the garden, and how you should go about making a bilum, and what you should pack in the bilum. Like you got bilum blokarim kai. There's a bilum to carry babies. There's a bilum that belongs to the men. So when it's a bilum for the men, you don't jump over it. You don't open it. Let the men alone keep the bilum. Let the women alone keep the bilum. Let the babies alone sleep in the bilum. So they're all out there. You're not going to put a cooked sweet potato in a baby's bilum. So all these things, they're all out there. And then in the past, when girls are in the house, Mary, their mothers and their aunties teach them how to look after themselves, their body, how they should look after themselves by washing themselves, cleaning up themselves, how they should dress up to be decent women, how they should approach their husband and look after their husband. They're all done in the house, Mary, and the house, man. Now we are raising children who are running around in urban centers, in towns, and even in settlements, in places. People are moving, and as they are moving, the change in the culture and tradition has moved too. So you can be a traditional person that lives in the village, but when you move into town, you forget about the traditional lifestyle and you adopt into the town lifestyle. And in that way, it causes a lot of problems, social problem that comes back. So if we start revisiting our house, Mary, and our house man, start listening to our elders, start asking questions. In the past, I haven't heard of people dying of cervix cancer. I haven't heard of women dying of breast cancer when I was a little girl. Now I'm hearing all this. But in the past, my aunties and my mothers were taught in House Mary, so they know how to look after themselves. So I don't know, that's the answer what you're trying to.
I think if you think of the two videos that on the slides that we've seen, the vibrancy and the precarity of the spider's web, so attractive. The spider spins its own web in no time. The woman has to lend the ropes. But they are both exposed to questions about precarity and wanting to find a balance. Then you go back to the other show that shows you the fallopian tube, and then being contested by moralists appearing in the uniforms of policemen. The woman telling them that it's letter D, and then it's moved from the letter D into a computer something, and then it's gone to another. So what you find in the Bilum thinking is that it has a kind of genetic algorithm within its thinking. And so it is able to absorb and reprogram itself in the context of the interactions it encounters. So there's something about the Bilum, is that it can absorb and respond to new circumstances, the exigencies of life. And so they, you look at the patterns that they are producing constantly. The geometry shifts infinitely. It's an endless topology in mathematical terms. But if you were thinking about the autonomy of the body, the Bilum presents itself not quite autonomous, because it has a front and a back, and inside and outside. It has a handle to hang on or lean on, to be suspended on the shoulders or on the head, hanging in front of the chest or on the sides and so on. It has a left and a right. Bilum is quite dexterous. And it gives us all kinds of ways of thinking about what kind of future are we moving into as a body. If it's not autonomous, then what is it? Because it is open to information technology. Because our brains are corrupted by the internet. Our bodies are corrupted by cheap alcohol. And you did it very well to stop it in Alota. I think your brother Alan Bird is doing the same in Mubarak. All those kinds of things. So the body is not quite autonomous, so that you can put up borders about those intrusions that come in from all kinds of inroads into the body. We are, it's both having an integrity, but always fragile and exposed to exposures of all sorts, or threats of all sorts. A meeting also.
All right, due to time, I'd like to invite Mariel back up to the stage to introduce the second part of the evening. Let's give her a warm welcome.
such an inspiration. I mean, every time, like when I listen to Florence and Dr. Motu, it's humbling actually, and we're very, very lucky to be able to hear them speak tonight. So what I would like to move on with is to introduce the panel, the results of the panel discussions from this afternoon. Next week we have independence, but with the passing of time, building on the theme for this afternoon, we acknowledge that we are losing our elders that helped to birth the modern independent state of Papua New Guinea. This year we lost Grand Chief Sir Michael Samare, PNG's founding father. But Sir Michael, together with the prominent figures of the time, also foresaw in the writing of the Constitution. And Charles Abel's grandfather he wrote the Constitution. So I'm very happy that you are here tonight as well for that. I have a copy of what you see on the screen. But with the passing of time and in the writing of the Constitution, the elders foresaw the need to embed the key values that make the ancient peoples of Papua New Guinea, but very young nations still, collectively healthier and stronger. The preamble that you see on the screen here, we've translated that into Talk Pisin. It speaks of building on the traditional wisdom of the past, the need to harness science and new knowledge, and to create equal opportunities for men and women to safeguard PNG's future as a modern nation. The Constitution is the original Sustainable Development Roadmap for Papua New Guinea, and it stands proudly with one foot in the past and another facing the future. No one is invisible in the Constitution. Everyone counts. Every woman, man, boy, girl counts. But to thrive, they can't be invisible in our planning. Just like a village garden must be tended properly to gain a good harvest, the needs of both men and women must be taken into account in government's investment plans, in provincial health and education strategies, in policies that help to shape PNG's future, and donors that partner with the government of Papua New Guinea for its development share that responsibility too. The Houseman and Haus meri discussions this afternoon, led by Governor Bird and also Marsha, are no different from the responsibilities that the elders had in the villages when they shared the best knowledge available at the time for the good of the community. And this is what we have to do today in a very, very different world. The investment in explanation, information, and services about gender equality, human relationships, about reproductive health must be made today to safeguard PNG's tomorrow. And similarly, we can learn about the challenges facing other countries. As Dirk mentioned earlier today, UNFPA also launches the State of the World Population Report on bodily autonomy. A copy of this is on a flash drive. That was part of your little gift bag. Please do take a look at that. We live in a very complex world, and we have to find our way as partners with different generations. It's not 1970 anymore. We have different challenges, but younger generations still look to us for guidance. And it's up to us to also build that trust. So I'd like to invite our panelists up to the stage for the discussion to hear the key takeaways from the Houseman and Haus meri discussions from earlier today. And then I'll be back. Thank you. So Governor Bird, can I invite you up to the stage? Marsha, I'm going to hand over to you, Maureen. Where did she go? To invite the rest of the group up on the stage. Thank you so much. There you go. Thank you. Stephen, Bronwyn.
Can we have the rest of the panel here? Dr. Hakula, Sister Jennifer, and we'll have our young ambassador, Bronwyn Killy. Are we all okay? All right, so we'll just get each of the panelists to give a brief on what they have gone through today with the Hausman and the Haus meri discussions that took place today earlier on. And we'll start with Governor Alan Bird.
Thank you. Maureen, is it? Yeah, thank you. Look, good evening, everyone. We've all had a long day. I'll try to keep it short. We had a discussion around the things that used to take place in the traditional Hausman, the values that were there. Oh, sorry, Your Excellencies, I should have been more. Forgive me. Yeah, and so we tried to sort of contrast that with what is happening today with young PNG men, and why it is that there seems to be such a large disconnect between how men behaved, say, 30 years ago, and how the young men are behaving today, and to sort of try to figure out where we may have lost these connections. And I think some of it was discussed earlier today, and Florence spoke about the Haus meri and the Hausman, and the things that took place in those respective environments. For the men, and I think many Papua New Guineans who sit here have a similar experience. Certainly in my culture, the young men are taken away. In fact, boys are taken away, and then they go through this rigorous process of coaching, taught in the traditional knowledge of, a wide variety of things, like how to look after yourself as a man, and all those sorts of things, and then going through to being introduced to ancestral spirits and all those sorts of things, and then after that process, you come out as a man. If in the olden days, if you did not go through that process, then you were not regarded as a man. You cannot be admitted into the Hausman. You cannot take part in discussions around what may be good for that community and its desires about things that it wants to do in relation to whether resources or moving the village, because in those days they were semi-nomadic, that moved to where the resources were and those sorts of things. So that's what occurred then. Fast forward to today, obviously. We no longer have those big extended families, certainly around the towns. You've got young men who are perhaps members of a nuclear family. There might not be a father there, or he may be absent most of the time, he's working. They are shipped off to school where there's a stranger there, a totally different culture, perhaps trying to teach them in, the modern definition of education. And so we begin to lose that connect. And as these boys become men, they no longer have the connection back to the village, the structures in the village that would sort of ensure some sort of compliance. If they misbehave, well, they're no longer subject to those influences and so on and so forth. And sort of trying to figure out, I like what Dr. Moto said about this creeping in, the Western things that have creeped in, things like alcohol, and some of the other influences, perhaps even, the misguided use of religion and so on and so forth, to break down the strong hold that traditional societies used to have, particularly over young boys who would eventually become men. So these are the sorts of things we discussed in the.
Thank you so much for that recap for today's Hausman discussion. Those that were not here, Governor Bird and many other young male representatives were also here, and they did have a lot to say. You can check it out on Facebook. It was actually streamed live. So up next, I'll pass it over to Dr. Hakula, and she'll share her bit on how the Haus meri discussion went earlier on today.
Thank you. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to be part of the Haus meri discussions this afternoon, but I have have an idea of what was being discussed. And I think what I'd like to share today is really the interlinkages with what we've been discussing, and that's around the Bilum, things that are really very dear to my heart. Bilum, I'm an avid Bilum collector. I change some people change their bags every day, every week. I carry a different Bilum every week. And you know that the symbolism of motherhood, this la Bilum blo baby. So those, the Bilum addressing gender-based violence, as some of you know, in my previous life as a researcher, I've done a lot of work addressing gender-based violence, especially working with the village courts. And in my research, I've found that a lot of cases that come to the village court around domestic violence, married pipe, all of that has some kind of sexual leads back to sexual jealousy perceived, or adultery, or all of those kinds of things. And so I think these discussions, especially for young people, and I'm really pleased to see so many young people here, is really important, because we're talking about bodily autonomy, but we're also talking about linking back to passing custom blayumia. And so I think it's also about finding that balance, because we're an oral society. In many cases, some of our traditions, the ways in which we did gender, men and relations between men and women have changed over time, and those oral traditions may have been lost over time, and also because we now live in this global world, so we've got to be able to connect the global to the local, but also hold on to the very good things about our house man and our house meri. And so this initiative of the Bilum, coming back to the Bilum, is a really good one, but as I've mentioned, I think we also have to be careful that we don't romanticize in a way that we will marginalize those who really need the support in our communities, and the evidence is there around our high rates of teenage pregnancy, high rates of the maternal issues around maternal health, and that's something that's very close to my heart as well. I have given birth to 4 children. I lost my first child through preeclampsia because there wasn't the right facilities 14 years ago at the Port Moresby General Hospital, and I went on to have 3 other children. I'm the mother of 3 girls. And so I think having these conversations in a different way and involving those who really matter, the young people, or mama, or community, or papa, is a really important thing. Many times we talk about reproductive health as something but it involves both men and women. And I think drawing on our own customary ways of engaging in these conversations, the positive ways will be good for us. And so I think we can really build on the houseman and house meri conversation to suit the context by which we live in now, which means that's engaging with our rural people, our majority of our people, and also the urban context where we have a lot of, if I may say, disenfranchised young people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hakula. Let's give her a round of applause. Up next, we'll have Sister Jennifer to share her bit on how the discussion went on for today. Are we all feeling good? That's great. Let's keep those smiles up.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you. I would like to, first of all, thank UNFPA and the organizing committee here. I've been waiting for something like this to happen. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Pekalia. I'm a midwife who has been working in Port Moresby General Hospital for 45 years. And I look after that maternity wing. And you know what, my heart always aches when I see 12-year-old getting pregnant, women delivering on the floor. We just can't just cope with it. It's just too much. I came to Moresby in 76, 18-year-old, and I'm reaching 63 years now, and retiring in 2 weeks' time. What's going to, yeah. Thank you. And what's happening in our nation's hospital? Everybody is coming to Port Moresby. What's happening to the 89 districts, 22 provinces? I'm very fortunate to see our leaders here, especially the member of parliament here. We need to move. I'm sitting here on behalf of the women and the girls, teenage, even rape case, all sorts of cases coming to Port Moresby. Sometimes I just go away and cry. I wish, this is a beautiful country with all the resources. What's happening? Thank you, Bilum Meri. You did a marvelous project. Women carry babies. Baby grows in the uterus. Decision comes between two people, a man and a woman. Is that happening in Papua New Guinea? It's not. A lot of things to talk about, but all I want to say is thank you for organizing this meeting so that this message will go out to Papua New Guinea. And first of all, Port Moresby City, I would in this meeting ask the 3 electorates to build their own hospitals and Central Province to build their own hospitals. Port Moresby General Hospital is for all these 3 electorates, and the Central Province, Gulf Province, and imagine all those referral cases. We want to carry Port Moresby General Hospital as a referral hospital for Papua New Guinea, not catering all these provinces. We have all the members. Please, we have to work on that. With that, I will appreciate that this young growing country with a lot of resources to prosper, just like any other rich countries. We are rich. Our weakness is leadership. So, as a mother here, as a grandmother, I have 4 grandchildren, I have grown-up kids. All my life I've been in Port Moresby, and I'm seeing it, I'm going away and I'm crying. My heart is aching. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Sister Jennifer. Now we'll hand over the mic to our young ambassador for UN, Bronwyn Keeley, to, of course, summarize everything and have her say as well on how her discussions went today.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Firstly, thank you for making time to come and be part of this event. So I think I will speak more on why we came up with the discussions on the Haus Man Dialogue or the Haus Meri Dialogue. And for, when we have strong barriers or when we have challenges with regards to access to services for reproductive health, or even just when we have barriers that make it challenging to discuss, just even talk about reproductive health, some of those that are most affected are young people. In Papua New Guinea, and the current statistics are about 22% of girls who reach the age of 19 already have 1 child, and that's pretty high. And these are the numbers that we can't. And I've as young ambassador, I travel to different provinces, and every single time we go, one of the biggest challenges is access to reproductive health services, information that is youth-friendly for young people, or just spaces for young people to come and actually get information or speak about the challenges that they're having. And in Papua New Guinea, when you talk about reproductive health, when you talk about women's bodies, when you talk about access to family planning, these are discussions that are considered taboo or very sacred. It doesn't mean that we don't talk about them. It means that we talk about them in secret. Or we have our systems, our traditional systems that are there in which we feel safe to talk about these things. The reason why we decided to start these conversations this way, where we group, we have the Haus Man Dialogue, where we have the Haus Meri Dialogue, and particularly the Haus Man Dialogue, is that we need a starting point for these conversations. And we need to start at a point where people feel most safe discussing these topics. As we can see, a lot of the things that we're trying so far to push our agenda on health, or even just get discussions flowing, to raise awareness on the issue, to do advocacy, a lot of the things we're doing over and over again are not working. And so we're looking for innovative ways to start this conversation. So if it means that we need to get young men and women, or young men, to get comfortable discussing reproductive health issues or challenges amongst themselves first. If they can get comfortable discussing these issues with themselves first, then maybe it would make it easier to eventually, like as a community and as a country and as a society, start talking about these discussions openly. And so this was sort of like an idea for an entry point, a starting point for conversations. This is why we have the Haus and Haus Meri dialogues. So it's not a case of, we want to go back to where we were before. This is where we are now, and this is what we have as a starting point for conversation. So this is the idea around these discussions, the Hausman conversations, so the Haus Meri conversations. And after these discussions, we hope to take them out to, the media. A lot of times we consider culture as a barrier, but as you can see with the Bilum campaign, trying to do is use it as a tool as well to address, and use it as, the very thing that is the barrier, use it as a tool to address that exact barrier. The other thing as well with the Bilum campaign is, with young people, we're at a stage where we're at like the crossroads. We have the modern, the Western culture, and then we have, traditional culture. We're trying to decide what we can adapt and what we won't adapt. And at the same time, we have independence approaching. So it's a time for us to reflect on the national goals and directives of our forefathers, or the vision that our forefathers had for this nation. And so this platform is an opportunity for us to also reflect on what is the vision of our forefathers? What are the national goals and directives of the country? What is the vision that we want as young people? Because we are not just leaders of tomorrow, we are the shapers of tomorrow. We are the shapers of the future. And so it's an opportunity for us to reflect what the vision is, what exact vision we want for our country, where we want to go, what the national goals and directives are, what traditions and customs can actually help us progress, and what we need to let go of. And that is a discussion and a decision that will remain for Papua New Guineans to decide. But this campaign and this platform and these conversations is an opportunity to start these conversations and start these reflections. And so that is the point of the discussions, and that is why we are looking at cultural integration as a starting point. With that, I will hand over back to the MC.
Thank you so much. Let's give our panelists a round of applause as they make their way back to their seat. Thank you so much, Governor, Dr. Hakula. Oh, I forgot. Any questions? Sorry to stop you there, Governor. One that has a thought in mind that was itching while they were having their brief sum up of how the discussions went on today? Does anyone have a question? No? All right, well, we'll... Oh, yes.
I understand the pressures of in the labour ward at POMGen, and I just wanted to know how many births take place there per week, and what's the average ratio of a midwife to a woman?
That question, it's very important. I would like to mention, but I actually forgot. We deliver 40 to 60 every day. Every day. On the note that you wrote, it's not correct. 40 to 60 every day. My obstetrician is here somewhere, Mary. She will confirm that. And we operate 20 to 30 every day. And I have only 30 midwives. WHO record for developing country is 1, 2, 3 to 1 midwife. Developed country is 1 to 1. But I am delivering 6, 10. When someone, if 8 midwives rostered, if 2 fall sick, something happens, most of them are women with children and young kids. Then that person, only 1 or 2, is attending to 8 to 10. That's why I mentioned earlier, some of them are delivering unattended, which is a danger. That's what's happening. That's happening in Papua. I'm actually the president of Papua New Guinea Midwifery. I'm wearing this shirt to campaign for our mothers and young girls out there, not only for Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea is going through the same thing. We get a report all the time, it's happening. So this is a serious issue that we are going through silently, but now it's coming out. Papua New Guinea will see us speaking, and they will think about it, especially in the business people. I always say woman is the leader in the family. People, she's looking after the family, giving birth. All of us came from a woman. If especially your mother was not there, we wouldn't be here, isn't that right? So that's why we have to look at women and our young girls, even Port Moresby General Hospital and other hospitals too, about like ages between 11 and 12 who are being raped, who are pregnant. My doctor will say yes, it is true, it's happening. It's happening in Papua New Guinea too, so family planning is the way to go, and that's another issue we have to address in this country. I already said we have the resource, but it's a leadership. That's the way I.
Thank you so much, Sister Jennifer. We've got one question and then we'll wrap things up.
Hi, my name is Yanam Lin, and I would like to ask this question to, I don't know if all of you will respond or not, but when I first was a kid, my mom taught me how to weave. That was the first thing I learned as a girl child, apart from cooking and cleaning the house. So it's a very innovative way to start a conversation. So congratulations to UNFPA. And as a young person, I sometimes find it to start a kind of conversation with my peers. And just to give you a context, the very remote communities in the country, I started off grade 1 with at least 15 girls. So the number of boys were more than girls. When I arrived in grade 7, the third girl in the class of 3 girls, and the rest fell pregnant before grade 7. And they left school even though they were bright. So that's the reality of a lot of villages around the country where girls they lack the awareness around how they can make proper choices and decisions when they are reached that age where they are sexually active. So how can a young person like me, when I visit home, how can I start this conversation where with my family or with the girls in my community, and if there's a plan that UNFPA has to individuals in India, where it could be anyone who is interested to educate the community about sexual reproductive health and the rights of women, especially young girls, because that's one of the factors that is affecting girls to even complete their education. It's just awareness on when they are sexually active and when they should be making the decision to actually engage in sexual activities. So the lack of the knowledge around that has actually affected them. Even though they're bright, they fall pregnant before even reaching 6th grade or 5th grade, because we know that girls, they develop voice. So
do you want to take this one?
Okay, I'll just I'll give my answer, but Mariel can add on as well if she wants to. Okay, so yes, Yananwen, you are correct. It is very challenging to talk about sexual reproductive. One of these concepts that a lot of young people are trying, and different youth organizations, is peer education. Some of you in the room have probably already heard of peer education, and peer education is when a young, you train them, you sensitize them on gender, LGBT, and they take that information and they disseminate it amongst their peers. The reason why effective is because the first people that a young, a young girl or a young boy, if they want to talk, if they want to ask a question about sex, they the best friend, not the mother. I know I wouldn't go to my mother, but they will go to someone they feel most comfortable, someone common understanding with. They have their own language. I think it's a as well. You refer to discuss best friend or with someone you have common understanding with. So something at UNFPA through our implementing partners, and we're advocating this peer education concept, but also comprehensive sexuality education. And these things are happening, but they need more support. There isn't enough support, or maybe we need to prioritize even more. And like comprehensive sexuality education, that's something that should be mainstreamed into our education system, because we have that use existing system. We need the political power, the willpower of, we need the motivation from our donors, our and everyone has to and push for this. The young people are trying, and they're as they can. I'm amazed at what they're able to do with the little that they have. They go out of their way, even sell and sell food. They buy food from the markets to sell, just to even get, the basic things that they need to do this. So they are doing their part, but they need the support. So I think comprehensive sexuality education is something that we need to invest in for Papua New Guinea, and at the same time, at how we deal with, sexual reproductive health education in the schools. Currently, part of personal development, and it's something that should be taught in schools. But the challenge is that in the school system, the teachers are not they're not willing to teach it. They're not comfortable, even if it's part of their curriculum. So that means we need to not just invest, we look at how we approach sexual reproductive health or comprehensive sexuality education. To put a lot of support to the young people out there who are doing the work. They're willing to do the work. They just need the support. Of families, I think one of the biggest things that each and every one of us can do as well is to look within our own communities first. It starts with us. It starts with creating a safe space within your own home to have these discussions before you can feel community. It's a bit difficult to just walk into a village and have that discussion. Do your baseline and find out what the sensitive ways are of addressing this issue. But one of the best things you can do in your own homes, a safe place for discussion. Yeah, I will leave it at that.
All right, thank you so much. We are running out of time, so I'll close. Applause for our panelists here.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Out of Bronwyn, our young ambassador for sexual and reproductive health. I mean, what a fantastic another round of her. It's a little bit longer, as I decided to split my speech into 3 parts because I didn't want, but bear with me more minutes. So, in the 21st century, PNG is a country in the South Pacific, resource, but we've heard it's unequal, and investments are made unequally, leaving the young people to fend for themselves. And when this happens, trust is undermined, and this translates lack of investment in social capital at a time when we need it to build PNG's future. PNG faces in its declining system. We paid the price collectively in terms of a similar decline of trust by people in governments and vaccines. Access to health and education is foundational, as it gives us the opportunity to engage and build trust when they are most vulnerable. You can't buy social capital, but it's hard currency, fake news, and for building healthy social norms. So we have a responsibility collectively to nurture healthy social norms that are mindful of PNG's past, present, and future.
Papua New Guinea, it's a country where 60% of the population is under 25. The population is rural. Most young people are not formally employed. 12% of girls have had their first child at the age of 18. PNG has HIV, AIDS, and STI infections, and the highest rates of HIV, AIDS, drug resistance in the world. Intimate partner violence is common. 60% of women report experiencing intimate partner violence in the past 12 months. Despite of access to information and services for the population of PNG regarding sexual reproductive health, bodily autonomy, and there is a collective need to come together to create an enabling environment for social and gender norms to change for the country to be able to deliver on the promises made at independence in 1975. The past is with us and the present needs us. Many of us in this room today have an important role to play in supporting the government's to implement its Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. The development is not only for the male population, it's also for the 2.2 million active age and almost 2 million adolescents and many more children yet born. The development agenda is for those furthest, those who we see visible in our investment choices. Today, we advocate for the skin pig woman, diamond twin, the half diamond mentor, the mountaintop elders, European tube mothers. The Bilum is part of the woman's story in PNG, story to be understood and acted upon for the sake of the present and the future. Before I close, I want to acknowledge the support of our donors that contribute directly to our program in Papua New Guinea, the Government of Australia, DFAT, European Union, Zonta International. We also have donors that contribute to UNFPA globally, like in Europe, Germany, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, UK, and Netherlands. Often these donors never get a mention, but without that support, we wouldn't be here today because our program is too small for the challenges that we face. I would like to acknowledge Florence and all the Goroka Bilum weavers who are stand up, Florence. All the ladies, let's give you a round of applause. Come on, don't. Dr. Andrew, and please.
Partners, Pigeons, who made such a beautiful video. I would also like to acknowledge you and my friends who have made this event possible. So now, I'm very pleased with myself because I normally forget to give the thanks. Comfortable but necessary conversations between the young and old that we need to have to keep PNG on a positive development trajectory. We commit to investing in building social capital. We are the elders now. It's our responsibility to look out for the young of today. And all. This is a partnership. Together we make change. Yumi PNG. Thank you.
And welcome. Together we can make childbirth safer for the babies.
Stop violence against women and help our girls reach the full potential.
Together we are one people.
Together we
one.
If we're lucky, there might be something. First, much for coming.